Hey there, tonight we're exploring the bustling world of a Victorian nurse in 19th-century London, where the truth is antiseptic was a revolutionary concept, not a standard practice. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now settle in, maybe turn on some white noise or grab your favorite blanket, and let's drift into tonight's story together. The squeaky symphony of horse-drawn cabs and the distant clang of church bells are your alarm clock, prying you from dreams to the reality of a Victorian nurse's life in 19th-century London. As your eyes flutter open, you're greeted not by the gentle morning light, but by a grimy window that filters the day into a dull grey. Welcome to your morning routine, where the first task is navigating the chaos of the crowded boarding house you call home. You roll out of bed, careful not to step on your roommate's half of the floor. Privacy is a luxury, and you, my friend, are not living in luxury. In this cramped little space, where the scent of coal smoke mixes with yesterday's boiled cabbage, you prepare yourself for the day's challenges. A quick splash of water on your face from the shared basin, an exercise in restraint and speed, is all the refreshment you'll get before heading out the door. The mirror, if you can call a piece of polished tin that, reflects a tired but determined face. Today, like every day, you're off to care for the city's sick and poor. Your morning routine is as unvarnished as the floorboards beneath your feet, yet it's a fitting prelude to the gritty work awaiting you. It's easy to romanticize the image of the angelic nurse, Florence Nightingale, haloed by the glow of history. But today's reality is far from soft focus. You're not just a caregiver, a multitasking miracle worker expected to juggle tasks that range from administering care to scrubbing floors. The tools of your trade aren't sterile steel, but rather whatever can be spared, and your reward, a princely sum of £14 a year. Yes, 14, which is about the cost of a decent suit for a gentleman with somewhere to go. This salary, while better than nothing, doesn't stretch far. Consider the cost of living. A loaf of bread is a penny, and that's just the bread. You're not exactly rolling in dough. Your wages are more a survival stipend than a ticket to comfort. Every penny is carefully counted, and yet you make it work somehow. But let's be clear, you're not doing this job for the money. You're driven by something else, perhaps a stubborn sense of duty or the ironclad belief that you can make a difference, small as it might be. As you step out into the bustling streets, you're enveloped in a cacophony of sounds. There's the distant call of a street vendor hawking eels. Yes, eels, and the rattle of carts on cobblestones. The air is a tangible thing, thick and acrid with the scent of industry, and the River Thames, which seems more a sluice than a waterway. London is alive, and its heartbeat is both thrilling and overwhelming. Your first task of the day looms ahead as you approach the hospital. A far cry from the sterile, polished environments of modern healthcare, this place is a monument to necessity. The walls are stained with the evidence of years, and the air inside is a stew of antiseptic mixed with the unmistakable tang of human suffering. The building itself seems to groan under the weight of its purpose, a solemn reminder that here life and death are daily companions. Patients await, and your day begins in earnest. You're not just administering medicine, you're offering empathy, albeit with a side of practicality. There's no room for sentimentality when you're dealing with the harsh realities of disease and poverty. Your patients come from all walks of life, but most are the city's invisible backbone, the laborers, the destitute, the forgotten. They trust you with their lives, and you carry that trust like a well-worn cloak, heavy but familiar. In this world, myths of the selfless, angelic nurse dissolve like fog in the morning sun. Romanticized image is replaced by the gritty truth. You're a professional in a field that demands everything you have and more. There's nothing ethereal about cleaning wounds or comforting a dying child. The work is messy and exhausting, but it's also necessary. Without you and your colleagues, the city's sick would be left to navigate the harrowing journey of illness alone. As you move through your morning rounds, the rhythm of the hospital becomes your own heartbeat. Each bed tells a story, each patient a chapter in the sprawling narrative of human resilience. You're part of something larger, a cog in the machine of Victorian healthcare that keeps turning despite the odds. It's tiring, yes, but there's a strange satisfaction in knowing that your hands, calloused and stained, are making a difference. So there you are in the thick of it, living the life of a Victorian nurse. You're not a saint, and you're certainly not an angel. You're a person doing their best in a city that never stops moving, where the clatter of hooves on cobblestones is a constant reminder that life, despite its challenges, goes on. And as you navigate the morning, it's clear that while the myths are appealing, the reality is where the true story lies. And just like that, you dive headfirst into the bedlam of a Victorian hospital morning shift. No need for caffeine when you've got chaos as your wake-up call. The first thing you notice is the pervasive smell. It's a cocktail of human misery seasoned with a hint of carbolic acid, the go-to antiseptic of the day. If only it were as effective as it was pungent. You see, the Victorian era was a time when the word antibiotics was as imaginary as unicorns. Infections weren't just a possibility, they were practically guaranteed. A simple cut could escalate into a full-blown battle for survival, and guess what? The bacteria had a head start. Diseases like cholera were the grim reapers of the time, sweeping through the population with ruthless efficiency. London, with its bustling streets and crowded living conditions, was a banquet for such epidemics. Cholera didn't discriminate. It hit rich and poor alike, though the poor suffered disproportionately. This was a time when the concept of germ theory was still in its infancy, a mere whisper in the minds of scientists like Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch. The average Joe, or Jane in your case, was left to grapple with illness using little more than intuition and rudimentary tools. Speaking of tools, let's talk about ether. This was cutting-edge technology in the mid-19th century, a marvel that made it possible for patients to undergo surgery without feeling every excruciating second. Before ether, your best bet at pain management was a swig of whiskey and a prayer. But let's not romanticize ether too much. It came with its own set of risks. Administering it was more art than science, and more than a few patients never woke up from their chemically induced nap. Yet, despite its dangers, ether was hailed as a miracle, proof that even the bleakest times were not without their small victories. Now, about those hospitals. If your image of a Victorian hospital involves pristine white sheets and bustling orderlies, it's time for a reality check. The truth is far less Instagram-worthy. Hospitals were overcrowded, underfunded, and often as dangerous as the ailments they treated. The mortality rate was alarmingly high, a grim reminder that entering a hospital was a gamble with odds stacked heavily against you. Yet, despite the squalor and the stench, these institutions were crucial. They were places of learning and experimentation, where the seeds of modern medicine were sown, albeit in less than ideal conditions. As you move from bed to bed, you're more than just a nurse, you're a lifeline. You're armed with little more than bandages and a steely resolve, doing your best to bring comfort where science falls short. The patients are a mosaic of London's diverse populace, dock workers with crushed limbs, seamstresses with tuberculosis, chimney sweeps battling respiratory diseases. Each one tells a story of struggle, a testament to the harsh realities of industrial-era life. And you're both witness and participant, navigating this world with a blend of compassion and practicality. Let's not forget the economic backdrop to all this. Your salary, as mentioned, barely covers the essentials. The cost of living in London is a constant reminder of how precarious life is. With bread a penny a loaf and meat a luxury, every coin counts. Yet for many, the hospital is a refuge, a place where the destitute find care they couldn't afford elsewhere. It's a paradox, really, an institution struggling to stay afloat while serving those who are drowning in poverty. And while we're myth-busting, let's tackle the notion of the selfless, angelic nurse. Sure, dedication is part of the job description, but the reality is far more complex. You're not a saint. You're a professional. The work is grueling, the hours long, and the recognition minimal. But it's also deeply rewarding in ways that defy explanation. Whether it's the gratitude of a patient or the camaraderie with fellow nurses, there's something undeniably fulfilling about being part of this world, imperfections and all. As the morning wears on, the rhythm becomes familiar. The clang of metal trays, the rustle of sheets, the murmured conversations, all blend into a symphony that's as chaotic as it is comforting. You're part of a living organism, a community bound not just by duty, but by a shared humanity. It's a stark contrast to the sanitized, efficient hospitals of today, yet it holds a certain charm. a raw authenticity that's hard to replicate. So, as you wrap up your morning rounds, take a moment to reflect. You're standing at the crossroads of history, part of a profession that's evolving even as you work. The myths are alluring, but the reality is where the true stories unfold. And while the challenges are many, so too are the moments of triumph. In this world of contradictions, you find your place, not as an angel, but as a vital force in the ever-turning wheel of Victorian healthcare. So, as you wrap up your morning rounds, take a moment to reflect. With the morning cacophony behind you, it's time for a well-earned break. Lunch is a precious interlude in your day, a chance to recharge and maybe even ponder the grand tapestry of the era. You're not just a cog in the machine of Victorian healthcare. You're in the middle of a social and political revolution, whether you realize it or not. Ah, lunch. Or rather, the 19th century version of it, a hasty affair consisting of whatever's been tucked into your apron pocket. Maybe bread and cheese if you're lucky, or a bit of cold meat if the stars align just right. It's not a gourmet spread, but it's fuel enough to get you through the afternoon. As you nibble, let's chew on some history, shall we? Enter Florence Nightingale, the lady with the lamp. A name so drenched in reverence, it practically drips. It's tempting to envision her as the sole savior of nursing, a solitary figure wandering the halls of history, lamp in hand. But let's add a little nuance to our portrait, shall we? Nightingale was indeed a trailblazer, but she was part of a larger movement that was as much about grit as it was about grace. Born in 1820, Nightingale was a woman who defied social conventions. When most of her peers were perfecting their embroidery skills, she was sharpening her mind. By 1854, during the Crimean War, she was leading a group of 38 nurses into the chaos of military hospitals. These were not places of healing, but rather warehouses of suffering. Nightingale found hospitals with a mortality rate of 42%. Yes, you heard that right, 42%. It's like flipping a coin, but with fever and infection as the stakes. Nightingale's influence was seismic. She didn't just bring compassion, she brought order, scrubbing floors and implementing hygiene practices that sliced that mortality rate down to 2%. Her work wasn't just about saving lives, it was about setting a precedent. She published Notes on Nursing in 1859, a cornerstone text that laid the foundation for modern nursing education. Her insistence on better sanitation, nutrition, and patient care was revolutionary. Now, let's not get too swept up in the glow of her lamp. Nightingale was a complex figure, both revered and criticized. For one, he wasn't a fan of germ theory. Yes, she and Louis Pasteur would have had quite the debate. She focused on environmental factors rather than microorganisms, a perspective that worked wonders in the filthy conditions of her time, even if it later proved limited. And while Florence is the face of nursing reform, she wasn't alone. The movement was a collective effort. Women like Mary Seacole, a Jamaican nurse, also played pivotal roles. Seacole was a contemporary of Nightingale, who funded her own trip to the Crimean War and set up a British hotel to care for sick soldiers. Her contributions were immense, yet largely unsung, until recent years. It's a stark reminder that history often favors the popular narrative over the complete one. As you finish your makeshift meal, let's shift gears to the broader canvas of Victorian public health, or lack thereof. Ever heard of the Great Stink of 1858? No, it's not the title of a Dickens novel, but it could be. During that sweltering summer, the River Thames turned from waterway to a veritable cesspool, its stench so overpowering that it actually halted sessions in the House of Commons. Imagine politicians actually fleeing the seat of power because of the smell. Now, that's a power move by Mother Nature. The Great Stink was more than just an olfactory offense. It was a wake-up call. It highlighted the desperate need for improved sanitation. London was growing, and its infrastructure was buckling under the weight of its own population boom. The city's sewers were overwhelmed, and the Thames, once majestic, was reduced to an open sewer. Cholera outbreaks were rampant, claiming thousands of lives. It was clear that public health was not just a matter of personal hygiene, but a societal necessity. In response, the government commissioned a network of sewers designed by Joseph Bazalgette. His work was a marvel of engineering, a subterranean labyrinth that transformed London's sanitation system. Completed in the 1870, it was a game-changer, reducing the threat of cholera and making the city a safer place to live. The cost. a whopping £4. 2 million, equivalent to about £500 million today, a hefty price tag, but worth every penny in lives saved. As you ponder these grand narratives, it's crucial to remember how they intersect with your daily grind. The reforms sparked by Nightingale and the Great Stink didn't just change policy, they changed the very fabric of your work. Better sanitation meant fewer infections. Nursing reforms meant more training and more respect. Incremental progress, yes, but in a world where change often felt glacial, they were monumental. So, my friend, as you prepare to dive back into the fray, hold onto these reflections. You're not just a bystander in the annals of history, you're an active participant. Every patient you tend to, every wound you bind, adds to the evolving story of healthcare. It's a tale of triumphs and trials, of myths and realities, and you're right in the middle of it all. Lunch might be over, but the story, and your part in it, is far from finished. As you rise from your brief luncheon reverie, it's time to dive back into the bustling world of afternoon rounds. This is where the real stories lie, tucked away in the folds of hospital sheets and whispered between the clamor of metal trays. Each patient you visit is more than just a statistic in the ledger of Victorian healthcare. They're living, breathing chapters in the gritty novel of London life. Let's get one thing straight. The ailments of the time were as varied as the city's infamous weather. Tuberculosis, or TB if you like brevity, was the heavyweight champion of Victorian maladies, claiming lives with a slow, relentless grip. Known as the White Plague, it didn't discriminate, making itself at home in both the lavish drawing rooms of the wealthy and the cramped tenements of the poor. But TB wasn't the only villain lurking in the shadows. Cholera, smallpox, and typhus were all too eager to join the fray, each contributing their own brand of misery to the city's already overburdened health system. And what about the treatments, you ask? The Victorian era was a veritable playground for medical experimentation. Leeches were all the rage, because why wouldn't you want to slap a blood-sucking worm on your skin to balance your humours? It was like a spa treatment from the depths of a Gothic horror novel. Then there was laudanum, the miracle cure for everything from coughs to existential dread. This potent mix of opium and alcohol was the 19th century equivalent of popping an aspirin, except with a side of potential addiction and public disgrace. But don't let the absurdity fool you. These treatments were rooted in the best science of the time. The medical field was still fumbling in the dark, and every leech and laudanum bottle represented a step, albeit a wobbly one, toward the light of modern medicine. Now, while we're on the topic of wobbling, let's talk about the gender dynamics of nursing. The stereotype of the angelic, self-sacrificing female nurse is an enduring one, but it's not the whole picture. While women did make up a significant portion of the nursing workforce, men were far from absent. Male nurses, often referred to as orderlies or attendants, were a crucial part of the hospital ecosystem. They lifted patients, assisted in surgeries, and performed many of the same tasks as their female counterparts. One notable figure was James Miranda Barry, a military surgeon who served in the British Army and was only discovered to be a woman after death. Barry, along with other male nurses, defied the rigid gender roles of the era, demonstrating that nursing was not a purely feminine calling. The profession was, and remains, a tapestry woven with threads of both masculinity and femininity, each contributing to the rich history of caregiving. The economic context of nursing was as complex as the gender dynamics. Remember that £14 annual salary we mentioned? Well, it didn't exactly scream financial independence. Many nurses came from working-class backgrounds, and nursing was one of the few professions that offered women a semblance of autonomy. However, this autonomy came at a cost: long hours, grueling work, and societal judgment. It was a job that demanded resilience and a sense of vocation, traits that transcended gender. As you continue your rounds, the human stories unfold with each step. There's the dock worker whose crushed limb tells the tale of industrial hazards, the seamstress whose persistent cough hints at the crowded, damp conditions of her workroom, and the chimney sweep whose wheeze speaks volumes about the soot-filled lungs of child labourers. Each story is a thread in the tapestry of Victorian society, a society that was grappling with the seismic shifts of industrialization, urbanization, and social reform. And let's not forget the broader political and social backdrop. The Public Health Act of 1848 was a landmark piece of legislation, born from the realization that public health was not just a private concern, but a national one. It marked the beginning of government intervention in health matters, setting the stage for future reforms. The act was the result of tireless campaigning by figures like Edwin Chadwick, who recognized that the health of the nation was intrinsically linked to its prosperity. But change was slow, and the realities of hospital life were a far cry from the promises of reform. Overcrowded wards, underfunded facilities, and the ever-present specter of disease made the work of nurses a constant battle. Yet, despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, the spirit of innovation and determination thrived. Nurses became advocates, reformers, and pioneers, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in healthcare. As you wrap up your afternoon rounds, you realize that these human stories, these tales of struggle and resilience, are the heart of history. They're the reason you rise each morning, ready to face the chaos and the cacophony, the grime and the grit. You're not just bearing witness to history, you're shaping it with each patient you tend, each wound you bind, each life you touch. And so, as you prepare to transition into the evening shift, hold onto these stories. They are the lifeblood of your work, the essence of your calling. The myths are alluring, but the reality is where the true stories unfold. And while the challenges are many, so too are the moments of triumph. In this world of contradictions, you find your place, not as an angel, but as a vital force in the ever-turning wheel of Victorian healthcare. The story continues, and you're right in the middle of it, ready to take on whatever comes next. As the sun begins its descent, and the gas lamps flicker to life like weary sentinels, your shift meanders into evening territory. The day has been a marathon of humanity in all its splendid, messy glory. You're knee-deep in the muck and miracle of the human condition, and as the shadows stretch across the hospital floor, you can't help but ruminate on your place in this grand Victorian tableau. Let's talk impact, shall we? It's easy to get swept up in the hustle, but take a breather with me as we dissect the legacy of this era's nursing evolution. Warts and all, Victorian nursing was a crucible of change, and its ripples are still felt today. The professionalization of nursing, kick-started by the likes of Florence Nightingale, transformed it from a haphazard, often dismissed occupation into a respected pillar of healthcare. By championing sanitation and structured training, Nightingale laid the groundwork for what we now consider standard practice. Her legacy is a double-edged sword. She catalyzed progress, but also left behind a sometimes saccharine mythos that overshadows the gritty reality. Fast forward to today, and you'll find echoes of your Victorian counterparts in modern healthcare. The emphasis on hygiene and antiseptic procedures. You can thank those early pioneers for that. The push for evidence-based practice, though a few decades later, finds its roots in the methodical rigor Nightingale and her contemporaries advocated. Yet, it wasn't all progress and sunshine. The romanticized image of the selfless nurse persists, often masking the complexities and challenges of the job. It's a profession that demands not just compassion, but a resilience that's forged in the fires of daily adversity. Now, let's pull the lens back a bit. The Victorian era was a time of seismic shifts, industrial, social, and scientific. The Great Stink was more than a bad smell. It was a catalyst for public health reform. The completion of Bazalgette's sewer system in the 1870 was a game-changer, reducing cholera outbreaks and improving urban living conditions. These public health advancements, driven by necessity and a good dose of panic, laid the foundations for modern urban sanitation systems. It's a testament to the era's enduring impact that we can stroll along the Thames today without a handkerchief pressed to our noses. But let's not pretend it was all roses and progress. The Victorian period was rife with contradictions. It was an era of innovation shadowed by inequality, of scientific breakthroughs marred by societal blind spots. The healthcare system, much like the society it served, was a patchwork of privilege and poverty. While the upper echelons had access to burgeoning medical advancements, the poor often relied on overcrowded hospitals and charity. The gap between rich and poor was as vast as the River Thames itself, and just as murky. You see, myths and reality danced a complicated waltz in this era. The allure of the angelic nurse, the noble doctor, and the benevolent institution is tantalizing, but it's a patina that glosses over the grit. This was a time when the humors were still a thing, and the leech was a legitimate tool in the doctor's kit. Yet, this same era also saw the birth of modern medical science. It was a period of contradictions, the kind that make history so maddeningly fascinating. Let's not overlook the power of myth, though. These romantic narratives endure because they offer us a sanitized version of history, one that's easier on the conscience. The angelic nurse, the gallant doctor, they give us heroes to admire, even if the truth is more nuanced. These myths endure because they reflect our perennial yearning for order amidst chaos, for light in the darkness. They allow us to see ourselves as part of a noble tradition, a comforting thought when reality is far less tidy. As the clock ticks towards the end of your shift, consider this. You're part of a lineage that's as complex and contradictory as the era itself. The work you do is built on the foundations laid by those Victorian nurses, both their triumphs and their missteps. Their stories are woven into the fabric of modern healthcare, a tapestry of progress that's as rich as it is imperfect. In wrapping up this day, remember that history is a messy business. It's a mosaic of moments, each with its own color and texture, contributing to the grand narrative. The Victorian era, with all its contradictions, is a testament to the human spirit's capacity for both folly and brilliance. You're not just walking in the footsteps of giants, you're part of the ever-evolving story of healthcare, a tale that's far from finished. So, as you hang up your apron and head out into the London night, take pride in your role. You're not a relic of a bygone era, but a living link in the chain of progress. The myths are sweet, but the reality is where the heart of history beats. It's a legacy of resilience and innovation, of setbacks and comeback stories. And you, my friend, are right in the thick of it, adding your own chapter to this ongoing saga. Hypatia of Alexandria. Now there's a name that rolls off the tongue like a historical rock star, doesn't it? In the bustling, brainy city of Alexandria around the 4th century AD, she was a unicorn in a toga, a female philosopher and mathematician in a world that preferred its women seen, not heard. Born somewhere around 360 AD, Hypatia was the daughter of Theon, a mathematician himself who probably thought, not raise a daughter who can outthink the lot of them. So he did. He trained her in everything from mathematics to astronomy, and let's not forget philosophy, because what's a good ancient education without a little existential pondering? Now, Alexandria was no sleepy village. It was the intellectual equivalent of Silicon Valley mixed with a bit of ancient Vegas, a place where scholars, merchants, and the occasional charlatan rubbed elbows in its chaotic streets. The city was founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BC, and by the time Hypatia came along, it was the crown jewel of the Mediterranean. Picture this. Ships from all over the ancient world docking at its great harbor, their crews speaking a babel of languages, while trying not to trip over the city's famed cats. And right at the heart of this glorious mess was the Library of Alexandria, which was basically the Google of its day. If Google were a gigantic building filled with scrolls instead of search results, and you couldn't just type in how to make a toga. The library was a wonder of the ancient world, housing an estimated 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls. That's a lot of papyrus, folks. Here, scholars from all corners of the earth would gather, eager to learn or maybe just to escape the relentless stink of unwashed togas. The library had everything from mathematics treatises to maps of the stars, and it was the place where Hypatia would eventually make her mark. But let's not get too starry-eyed about this scholarly paradise. Alexandria was also a city of stark contrasts, where the pursuit of knowledge often got tangled up with power struggles and political intrigue. It's like the ancient version of Game of Thrones, but with less dragons and more scrolls. By Hypatia's time, Alexandria was a city on the edge, and not just geographically. Political tensions were as thick as the dust in its streets, with pagans, Christians, and Jews all vying for influence in what could easily have been the world's first reality show. The city had already been through a few rounds of being passed like a hot potato between the Roman Empire and its various power brokers. And while the library was the intellectual epicenter, it wasn't unusual to find the streets outside teeming with the kind of vibrant chaos that included everything from market disputes to the occasional riot. You know, just your average Tuesday in ancient Alexandria. But let's not forget the city's less glamorous side. While Hypatia was busy solving the mysteries of the universe, Alexandria was also solving the mystery of how to keep its streets somewhat navigable through the mess of donkey droppings and other, organic obstacles. It was a place where the grandeur of learning rubbed shoulders with the grit of daily life, and Hypatia, with her sharp mind and keen insights, thrived amidst this juxtaposition. She was a star in a city where stars were both studied and occasionally used for celestial navigation by sailors trying to avoid crashing into the Pharaoh's lighthouse, a 330-foot marvel that guided ships safely to port, assuming they weren't distracted by the city's many other delights. By the end of the 4th century, the golden age of Alexandria was starting to tarnish, and the political landscape was reshaping faster than a sand dune in a desert storm. Rome had officially adopted Christianity as the state religion under Emperor Constantine, and this shift brought with it a new set of ideological conflicts. The once pagan city was now at the epicenter of a cultural and religious tug-of-war, with Hypatia caught in the middle. Her life and work became a testament not just to her own brilliance, but to the tumultuous times she lived in, a time when the line between philosopher and heretic was as thin as a papyrus scroll. In this vibrant, volatile environment, Hypatia stood as a beacon of knowledge and reason. But let's not get carried away by the myth. Yes, she was remarkable, but she was also a product of her time, a time when being a woman in her position was as rare as finding a clean public bathhouse in Alexandria. She was admired not only for her intellect, but also for her character, with students flocking to her lectures, eager to learn from someone who could explain the cosmos without devolving into mystical mumbo-jumbo. She was like a TED talk in human form, captivating audiences with her insights and perhaps a bit of dry wit. So, while Alexandria may have been a city of contrasts, it was the perfect backdrop for Hypatia's story. It was a place where the sands of time constantly shifted, and where the pursuit of knowledge was both a noble endeavor and a dangerous game. Hypatia navigated this world with the skill of a seasoned sailor, charting a course through the intellectual currents of her day. Her legacy would ultimately transcend her time, leaving an indelible mark on the history of mathematics and philosophy. But her story also serves as a reminder that even in the most enlightened of settings, the pursuit of truth can be fraught with peril. And as we'll see, Hypatia's brilliance was both her greatest triumph and, tragically, her undoing. In a city where the word balance was almost as mythical as the existence of unicorns, Hypatia managed to keep her feet firmly planted on the ground while her mind soared through the cosmos. Her career as an educator was nothing short of revolutionary, not because she was some ethereal enchantress weaving spells of wisdom, but because she was the kind of no-nonsense professor who'd give you that stern, "I believe you can do better" look when you turned in half-baked work. Let's talk about her classroom, a place where the stars weren't just twinkling darts, but complex entities to be understood through the cold, hard logic of mathematics. Hypatia wasn't about to let her students float away on a cloud of vague philosophical musings. Her teachings in mathematics and astronomy were pragmatic, grounded in the use of tools like the astrolabe, a nifty device that was to ancient astronomers what the latest iPhone is to modern teenagers. This was the pocket-sized wonder that could help you chart the stars, predict celestial events, and maybe even impress your friends at the local symposium. The astrolabe was a marvel of ancient engineering, a flat disk that could measure the altitudes of stars and planets. It was the Swiss Army knife for stargazers, allowing them to navigate both the heavens and the seas. Hypatia used this tool to teach her students that the universe was not an unknowable mystery, but a giant clockwork machine, ticking away with mathematical precision. Her lessons were less about stardust and more about star charts. But let's lift the veil on the myth of Hypatia as some sort of ancient Miss Frizzle, whisking her students on magical journeys through time and space. In reality, she was more like that tough-as-nails math teacher you dreaded, yet deeply respected. She wasn't there to entertain, she was there to educate. Her students didn't sit cross-legged on the floor entranced by her words. They sat at desks, grappling with equations and learning the intricacies of geometry and algebra. If you came to her class hoping for a free pass to enlightenment, you'd quickly find yourself knee-deep in proofs and theorems instead. While the romantic image of Hypatia as a mystical muse is alluring, the truth is that she was a rigorous scholar with little time for fluff. Her approach was rooted in the belief that understanding the world required hard work and intellectual discipline. She taught Euclid's Elements like a gospel, guiding her students through the labyrinthine paths of logic and reason. It was a methodical journey, and there was no room for shortcuts. Economically, this was a period when being an intellectual was a bit like being a starving artist. Except instead of paintbrushes, you had scrolls, and instead of patrons, you had wealthy students who occasionally remembered to pay their fees. Hypatia's ability to draw students from across the Mediterranean wasn't just a testament to her reputation, but also to her pragmatic understanding of the educational marketplace. She knew that to teach effectively, she needed resources, and so she made sure her teachings had practical applications. Her students were equipped to navigate not just the philosophical currents, but also the economic realities of their world. In the context of Alexandria, a city that was always one political upheaval away from chaos, Hypatia's emphasis on the practical was a survival tactic as much as a pedagogical one. She taught her students how to think critically, to question assumptions, and to seek evidence. This was less about creating philosophers who pondered the nature of existence, and more about training astute thinkers who could adapt to the ever-changing tides of the Mediterranean world. And yet, despite her stern approach, Hypatia was revered. Her students spoke of her with admiration, not because she coddled them, but because she pushed them to their intellectual limits. She was the kind of teacher who, when you finally cracked a complex problem, would give you a nod of approval that felt like winning a small personal battle. In an age where knowledge was often cloaked in mysticism and dogma, Hypatia's insistence on clarity and logic was a breath of fresh air. But let's not gloss over the challenges she faced. Being a woman in a field dominated by men was like trying to sail against the wind. The fact that she thrived in such an environment speaks volumes about her intellect and tenacity. She wasn't just battling ignorance, but the societal norms that would have preferred she stayed in the shadows. Her presence in the male-dominated world of academia was a quiet yet powerful rebellion. As we peel back the layers of myth, we find a Hypatia who was neither saint nor sorceress, but a dedicated educator who believed in the power of knowledge to transform lives. Her legacy is not one of enchantment, but of empowerment, a reminder that true enlightenment comes not from the stars, but from the hard work of understanding them. Her teachings laid the groundwork for future generations, proving that while the stars may be eternal, our understanding of them is ever-evolving. So, as we continue this journey through Hypatia's life, let's remember her not as a mystical figure from a bygone era, but as a pioneering educator who dared to challenge the norms of her time. Her story is one of resilience, intellect, and a relentless pursuit of truth, a tale as relevant today as it was in the bustling streets of ancient Alexandria. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the political and cultural whirlwinds that would ultimately shape and shatter this remarkable woman's world. So, as the sands of Alexandria continued their relentless shift, Hypatia found herself navigating not just the dusty streets, but a political minefield that would make Westeros look like a picnic. Without dragons, of course, but plenty of metaphorical fire breathing from all sides. Hypatia's position as a leading intellectual wasn't just unusual, it was downright revolutionary. Think of her as the Beyoncé of the ancient world, but instead of selling out arenas, she was packing lecture halls with eager students and curious dignitaries. Now, let's talk about her interactions with the power players of her day. In the ultimate chess game of Alexandria, Hypatia was a queen who knew how to move across the board with strategic finesse. She had the ear of Orsts, the Roman prefect of Alexandria, which was no small feat. Orsts, whose name might sound like a character from a Greek tragedy, and whose life sometimes resembled one, valued Hypatia's counsel. He wasn't just any government official. He was the guy trying to keep Alexandria from imploding under the weight of religious tension and political backstabbing. Hypatia's advisory role with Orsts was a testament to her intellect and charisma. She wasn't just some ivory tower academic. She was a shrewd negotiator who understood the delicate balance of power in a city where alliances could shift faster than you could say, Eureka. Her influence wasn't some mystical hold over powerful men, as romanticized tales might suggest. No, it was the kind of influence that came from being the smartest person in the room and knowing how to use that brain power to navigate treacherous waters. But let's not sugarcoat things. Being a woman in a position of authority in the 4th century was about as easy as trying to explain cryptocurrency to a dinosaur. Hypatia was surrounded by men who often saw women as ornamental, not intellectual. Her very presence was an affront to the social norms of the time, and that stirred more than a few parts. The Christian patriarch Cyril, who saw himself as Alexandria's religious crusader, viewed Hypatia as a symbol of paganism and a threat to his influence. If life were a high-stakes game of risk, Cyril was the guy hoarding armies in Australia while everyone else was busy fighting over Europe. Cyril's rise to power marked a turning point in Alexandria's political climate, and Hypatia, despite her best efforts to remain an apolitical figure, was caught in the crossfire. Her friendship with Orsts was enough to paint a target on her back, as tensions between Orsts and Cyril escalated into a full-blown political feud. Alexandria was a powder keg, and Hypatia was sitting precariously close to the fuse. In this charged atmosphere, Hypatia continued her work, teaching and advising with the same fervor that had earned her such a formidable reputation. But it was a precarious balancing act. Her status as an intellectual icon was both her shield and her Achilles' heel. The very qualities that made her extraordinary also made her vulnerable to the volatile whims of political and religious leaders who felt threatened by her independence and influence. To understand the full scope of her challenges, let's dive into the broader economic and social context. Alexandria, with its bustling port and thriving trade, was a city of wealth and opportunity, but also one of stark inequality and social unrest. The economic disparities between the elite and the everyday Alexandrian were as wide as the Mediterranean itself. While the city's intellectual elite debated philosophical questions in the shadow of the great library, the average citizen was more concerned with the price of wheat and the latest tax hike. Hypatia's role as an educator wasn't just about imparting knowledge for knowledge's sake. She understood that education was a tool for empowerment, and she wielded it like a master. Her students came from diverse backgrounds, some from wealthy families who could afford the luxury of learning, others drawn by the sheer magnetism of her teachings. She offered them not just academic enlightenment, but practical skills that could be applied in the real world. Skills that could help them navigate the complexities of Alexandrian society, and ideally, improve their social mobility. But myths and legends have a funny way of distorting reality. Later narratives painted Hypatia as a kind of magical figure, enchanting her students with otherworldly wisdom. In truth, her influence was rooted in the rigorous application of logic and reason. She wasn't casting spells. She was solving equations, teaching her students to think critically in a world that was often anything but rational. The myth of Hypatia as a mystical enchantress is alluring, no doubt, but it diminishes the real magic of her intellect and determination. She was a pioneer, breaking barriers and challenging the status quo at a time when doing so was akin to stepping into a den of lions wearing a stake suit. Her life was a testament to the power of knowledge as both a personal and societal force for change. As the political tensions reached a boiling point, Hypatia's position became increasingly precarious. Her close association with Orsts made her a target in Cyril's campaign to consolidate power and diminish pagan influence. This was not a time for neutrality. The city was a battlefield of ideologies where even the most cautious could find themselves caught in the crosshairs. In the end, Hypatia's story is one of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. She stood firm in her convictions, refusing to bend to the winds of political pressure. Her legacy, though marred by the brutal circumstances of her death, endures as a symbol of intellectual courage and the relentless pursuit of truth. As we continue to unravel the threads of her life, we'll see how her influence extended beyond the confines of her era, leaving an indelible mark on the tapestry of history. And so, the story of Hypatia marches on, a saga of brilliance and bravery that continues to inspire. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the final chapters of her life, where the stakes are as high as ever, and the sands of Alexandria continue to shift beneath her feet. In the midst of Alexandria's swirling sands of change, Hypatia navigated a city teetering on the edge of chaos. Picture a kettle over a fire, steam rising as tensions bubbled and boiled over. This was Alexandria in the early 5th century, a city embroiled in religious strife, so intense. It made modern political debates seem like a polite tea party. And at the center of it all was Hypatia, an intellectual giant standing amid the ruins of crumbling civility. Let's clarify something right off the bat. Hypatia's death wasn't the result of a single grand political conspiracy. Rather, it was the tragic culmination of a city's deeply entrenched divisions. Alexandria was a melting pot, sure, but one where the ingredients were more likely to combust than blend harmoniously. Christians, pagans, and Jews were locked in a perpetual tug-of-war for dominance, each group convinced that they had the divine right to control the city's fate. Enter Cyril, the newly minted patriarch of Alexandria, who wasn't exactly the picture of Christian humility. If anything, he seemed more interested in playing the role of a religious power broker, wielding influence like a scepter. Cyril was a man on a mission to consolidate his power, and he viewed any opposition, real or imagined, as a potential threat. In his eyes, Hypatia was an embodiment of pagan wisdom and intellectual independence, both of which were at odds with his vision of a Christianized Alexandria. Now, let's be clear. Cyril didn't personally order Hypatia's murder. That would be too neat and tidy for a story as tangled as this one. Instead, the simmering tensions between Orsts, the Roman prefect and ally of Hypatia, and Cyril's faction reached a breaking point. It was a classic case of she said, with a lot of they burned thrown in for good measure. The city was rife with rumors and propaganda, the ancient world's version of fake news, painting Hypatia as a dangerous pagan sorceress with more influence over Orsts than was deemed appropriate. In reality, Hypatia was more interested in celestial mechanics than earthly politics, but the truth often takes a backseat in the face of a compelling narrative. The idea of a powerful woman advising a high-ranking official was scandalous enough to make the rumor mill spin like a top. Stories of Hypatia's supposed witchcraft spread through Alexandria like wildfire, fueled by fear and ignorance. The economic backdrop of this drama was as volatile as the political one. Alexandria's economy was heavily reliant on its bustling port, a gateway between the Mediterranean and the riches of the East. Trade was the lifeblood of the city, but it was also a source of contention. Wealth flowed in, but so did inequality, and the disparities between the haves and have-nots were as glaring as the midday sun reflecting off the harbor. This economic tension only added fuel to the already blazing fire of religious discord. As tensions mounted, Hypatia found herself caught in a perfect storm of social and political upheaval. Her association with Orsts made her a convenient scapegoat for those looking to strike a blow against his administration. The streets buzzed with whispers of her influence, exaggerated tales casting her as the puppet master behind the prefect. In a city where perception often trumped reality, these tales took on a life of their own. Then came the fateful day in March 415 AD, when the simmering tensions erupted into violence. A mob, incited by fanatical elements within the Christian community, seized Hypatia on her way home. They dragged her from her chariot, a stark and brutal act that laid bare the raw nerve of Alexandria's societal fractures. What followed was a scene of horrific violence, a stark reminder of how easily reason can be drowned out by the roar of a mob. In the aftermath, some would try to paint her death as a martyrdom for paganism or a symbol of the clash between science and religion. But to do so would be to sanitize the grim reality of her demise. Hypatia's murder was not a calculated political assassination. It was a tragic result of a city's inability to reconcile its differences, a senseless act of brutality born from fear and fanaticism. Let's not romanticize the aftermath, either. The streets of Alexandria remained tense, with the city continuing to grapple with its identity crisis. Hypatia's death was a catalyst for further division, a reminder of the city's precarious balance between knowledge and ignorance, tolerance and intolerance. Her legacy, however, endures beyond the violent end she met. It serves as a stark cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing fear and misinformation to dictate the course of history. In the end, Hypatia's story is one of resilience and tragedy, brilliance and brutality. It's a tale as old as time, a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge can be perilous, but also profoundly impactful. As we look back, we're left with the indelible mark she left on the tapestry of history, a legacy of intellectual courage that transcends the boundaries of her time, challenging us to question, to learn, and to strive for understanding in the face of adversity. And so, as the sands of Alexandria continue to shift in the annals of history, Hypatia's story remains a beacon of enlightenment amidst the shadows of ignorance. Stay tuned as we delve into the legacy she left behind, the enduring impact of her work, and the lessons we can glean from her life and untimely death. As we sift through the sands of Alexandria's history, it's time to confront the ghost of Hypatia, not the ethereal muse or tragic heroine cooked up by Hollywood and romantic historians, but the flesh-and-blood intellectual powerhouse who left an indelible mark on the ancient world. Hypatia, the real deal, was a trailblazer whose legacy in mathematics and astronomy is both profound and, let's face it, complicated. Her life is a testament to the fact that legends are often born from the messy, unvarnished truths of reality. First, let's address the mathematical elephant in the room. Hypatia's contributions to mathematics were significant, even if they didn't involve inventing calculus in a fit of inspiration, or in her sleep, as some legends might suggest. Instead, her work focused on elucidating the complexities of conic sections, those lovely curves and shapes you probably battled with in high school geometry. She edited and commented on the works of Apollonius and Ptolemy, making them accessible to the scholars of her time. Her lasting legacy was not in creating new theories, but in refining and teaching the existing ones with an unmatched clarity that allowed future mathematicians to stand on her shoulders. In astronomy, Hypatia was like the original GPS for the stars, using the astrolabe to map the heavens with precision that would make a modern satellite blush. Her methods were instrumental in helping sailors navigate the treacherous waters of the Mediterranean, proving that a practical understanding of the cosmos was as much about survival as it was about scholarly pursuit. Her teachings on celestial mechanics laid the groundwork for future scientific advancements, a beacon of rational thought in a world often clouded by superstition. But let's not get carried away with the romantic notion of Hypatia as some lone genius pondering the mysteries of the universe from an ivory tower. Her achievements were the result of a lifetime of dedication, rigorous study, and a stubborn refusal to accept mediocrity. She wasn't some mystical figure doling out wisdom from on high. She was a teacher who knew that the devil was in the details, and that understanding those details required hard work and intellectual grit. So, how did Hypatia become this larger-than-life figure whose story transcends the dusty annals of history? Part of it is the allure of the tragic narrative, the idea of a brilliant woman cut down in her prime by a society that couldn't handle her brilliance. It's the stuff of epic dramas, the kind that leaves audiences shaking their fists at the heavens and demanding justice. But the truth is often more mundane and infinitely more instructive. Hypatia's life and death were not a simple battle between light and darkness, but a complex interplay of social, political, and economic forces. This brings us to her role as a symbol of intellectual resilience, a woman who dared to think differently in a world that preferred conformity. Her story resonates today, especially in the ongoing discussions about women in STEM fields. Let's face it, the gender gap in science and technology is about as persistent as a bad haircut, and Hypatia's story reminds us that the struggle for equality in intellectual pursuits has ancient roots. She was a pioneer, not just because of her gender, but because of her unwavering commitment to knowledge and truth. In a modern context, Hypatia would be right at home among today's trailblazing women in science, those who shatter glass ceilings with the same determination she displayed in navigating the male-dominated world of ancient academia. Her legacy challenges us to confront our assumptions about gender roles and encourages the next generation of women to claim their rightful place in fields historically dominated by men. But let's not ignore the economic landscape of Hypatia's time, which played a huge role in shaping her life and legacy. Alexandria was a city fueled by trade and commerce, where wealth was concentrated in the hands of a few, while the rest scrambled for the scraps. Hypatia's ability to draw students from across the Mediterranean was a testament not only to her reputation as a scholar, but also to her understanding of the economic realities of education. She knew that to keep the lights on, and by lights, I mean oil lamps, she needed to offer something of tangible value. a rigorous education that prepared her students for the real world. In examining Hypatia's life, we also need to reckon with the myths that have grown around her like ivy creeping up ancient stone walls. The idea of Hypatia as a tragic martyr for science and reason is appealing, sure, but it oversimplifies a complex reality. Her death was not the result of a single, well-orchestrated vendetta, but rather the tragic outcome of a society gripped by fear and intolerance. Yet, despite the myths and misconceptions, Hypatia's legacy endures as a symbol of the power of knowledge and the courage to challenge the status quo. Her story is a reminder that the pursuit of truth is not without risk, but that the rewards of intellectual curiosity are worth the struggle. In a world where narratives are often shaped by those in power, Hypatia's life encourages us to question the stories we are told, to seek evidence, and to embrace a spirit of critical inquiry. So, as we wrap up our journey through the life and legacy of Hypatia, remember this. History is not a static pageant of events, but a dynamic tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives. It's full of contradictions and complexities, a reminder that the past is not a distant land, but a mirror reflecting our own struggles and triumphs. Hypatia's story is a part of that tapestry, a testament to the enduring power of knowledge and the human spirit's relentless quest for understanding. In the end, Hypatia's legacy is not just about what she achieved, but about what she represents. The courage to think differently, the resilience to stand firm in the face of adversity, and the wisdom to know that true enlightenment comes from asking questions, not accepting easy answers. As we look to the future, let her story inspire us to challenge the narratives we inherit, to seek truth in all its complexity, and to never stop reaching for the stars. In 1157, Oxford witnessed the birth of a boy who would grow to be as much a medieval rock star as a king, Richard the Lionheart. Forget the soft lull of courtly love. This was a time when being a royal was more about dodging daggers than dancing at balls. Richard was the third son of Henry Roman II and Helena of Aquitaine, and let's just say family gatherings were more Game of Thrones than Downton Abbey. If your family squabbles involve monopoly, try adding armies and castles to the mix. Raised in the sprawling Angevin Empire that stretched from Ireland to the Pyrenees, young Richard's playground was a realm so vast it made the British Isles seem like a quaint backyard. His education was a blend of the expected and the extraordinary. He was schooled in the arts of chivalry. It's like Boy Scouts, but with chainmail and lances. He learned Latin and the langue d'oil, but his real passion was for the vibrant langue d'oc of southern France, because why settle for one Romance language when you can have the whole set? Richard's early life was a masterclass in medieval multitasking. While most kids his age were worried about their next meal, Richard was juggling political intrigue and family drama like a pro. His mother, Helena, was a powerhouse in her own right, and Richard was her favorite. She taught him the ropes of power, while his father taught him the necessity of keeping a dagger under the pillow. It was a family therapy session where the stakes were real and the swords sharp. By his late teens, Richard had already developed a taste for rebellion. In 1173, at the ripe age of 16, he joined his brothers Henry, the young king, and Geoffrey in a revolt against their father. Picture this. A teenage rebellion with the added twist of knights and castles. It wasn't just about curfews and allowances. It was about control over vast territories and feudal rights. The revolt was, unsurprisingly, a disaster. Turns out, running a rebellion is a tad more complex than running away from home. While most teens have to wash dishes after a failed rebellion, Richard had to negotiate with his father under the watchful eye of King Louis Roman VII of France. The Treaty of Mont-Louis, signed in 1174, was a medieval version of grounding. Richard had to promise to behave, but the tensions in the family were far from over. The Angevin family dynamic was less leave it to beaver, and more leave it to beaver traps. Despite the familial chaos, Richard emerged as a formidable figure. By 1175, he had been confirmed as the Duke of Aquitaine, a position that came with its own headaches. Aquitaine was the jewel in Helena's crown, a region rich in culture and wealth, and Richard had to prove he was more than just a rebellious teenager. He quelled revolts and solidified his power, proving that while he might have been young, he wasn't to be underestimated. One of Richard's most notable skills was his ability to turn the harsh realities of medieval life into opportunities. Warfare was the norm, not the exception, and Richard excelled in this brutal arena. He was a warrior through and through, with a flair for the dramatic that would have made any Hollywood director proud. His campaigns in Aquitaine were as much about asserting dominance as they were about honing his military prowess. Richard's early life was a whirlwind of battles, betrayals, and the occasional familial reconciliation. It was a world where alliances shifted as quickly as the wind, and loyalty was as rare as a peaceful Sunday dinner. Yet, through it all, Richard carved out a reputation as a charismatic leader and a fierce warrior. His lion-hearted persona was as much a product of his upbringing as it was his own making. In the end, Richard's early life was defined by the pressures and possibilities of his royal status. It was a life that demanded constant vigilance and adaptability. While he might not have had the luxury of a quiet childhood, Richard's early experiences laid the groundwork for the legend he would become. The Lionheart was more than a nickname. It was a testament to a life lived on the edge, where the roar of battle was a familiar lullaby. In a world where the stakes were high and life expectancy was low, Richard the Lionheart ascended to the English throne in 1189, ready to become more than just a legend in his own lifetime. It was a time when ruling an empire was akin to juggling flaming swords while riding a unicycle on a tightrope. And let's face it, Richard was all about the drama. With the Angevin Empire sprawling across England and parts of France, he had inherited a realm that was as politically complex as it was geographically vast. Now, don't let the tales of courtly chivalry fool you. This was medieval politics at its most cutthroat. Richard was stepping into shoes that were both difficult to fill and prone to stepping on toes. His father, Henry Roman II, had left behind a kingdom riddled with tensions, and Richard, never one to shy away from a challenge, was ready to tackle them head-on. His ascent to the throne was less about sitting on a cushy chair and more about launching into a lifetime of military campaigns and diplomatic maneuverings. But let's talk about the big-ticket item on Richard's to-do list, the Third Crusade. In a move that would make any modern financial planner cringe, Richard decided to fund this holy expedition with a king's ransom, literally. He amassed a staggering 100,000 marks to create a fleet worthy of his ambitions. To put that into context, that's about twice the annual income of the English crown at the time. Imagine financing it by selling off royal lands, raising taxes, and emptying the treasury faster than a medieval Black Friday sale. The logistical feat of organizing a crusade was no small task. We're talking about transporting thousands of men, horses, and enough provisions to sustain them on a journey that could last years. Richard's fleet was a floating city, sailing across the Mediterranean with a mission that was as much about glory as it was about faith. Yet, while the romantic image of crusading knights captures the imagination, the reality was far grittier. Disease, desertion, and supply shortages were the everyday challenges they faced, not exactly the stuff of legends. And then there's the matter of Richard's nickname, the Lionheart. It conjures images of a fearless leader with a mane of bravery, but the truth is a bit more nuanced. Sure, Richard was a tactical genius on the battlefield, with military prowess that would make any modern action hero envious. His strategies were as sharp as his swords, and he had a knack for turning the tide of battle in his favor. However, his temper could be as fiery as his courage. Richard's hard-headedness was legendary, leading to impulsive decisions that sometimes bordered on reckless. One such instance was during the siege of Acre, where Richard's impatience led to the execution of 700 Muslim prisoners, a move that shocked even his contemporaries. It was a stark reminder that the line between heroism and brutality was often blurred in the medieval world. The Lionheart's roar was not always one of noble defiance. Sometimes it was the sound of unchecked wrath. Despite these darker moments, Richard's charisma and larger-than-life persona captivated those around him. He was a king who preferred the battlefield to the throne room, a ruler who led from the front rather than issuing commands from a safe distance. His ability to inspire his troops was as much a part of his success as his tactical acumen. Richard's leadership was a double-edged sword, capable of cutting through enemy lines or, when wielded rashly, inflicting collateral damage. Yet, for all his military exploits, Richard's time actually spent in England was fleeting. He famously remarked that he would have sold London if he could find a buyer. His heart, it seems, belonged to his continental holdings and the crusading cause. While this might sound like the ultimate absentee landlord situation, it speaks volumes about his priorities and the geopolitics of the era. England was a jewel in his crown, but it was the wider stage of Europe and the Holy Land that held his true fascination. In the grand tapestry of medieval history, Richard the Lionheart stands out as a potent mix of myth and reality. His life reads like an epic saga, full of triumphs, tragedies, and the occasional plot twist that would make even Shakespeare raise an eyebrow. As we delve deeper into his reign, we'll continue to unravel the complexities of his character and the world he inhabited. The story of Richard is far from over, and as they say, the best is yet to come. Stay tuned as we navigate the next chapter of his legendary life, with the stage set and Richard the Lionheart ready to embark on his legendary escapades in the Holy Land. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of the Third Crusade. Imagine a medieval road trip, but instead of snacks and scenic stops, you have sieges and strategic maneuvers. Now, the Third Crusade wasn't just about reclaiming Jerusalem. It was a power play on a global chessboard, with Richard eyeing his ultimate rival, Saladin, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria. This was more than just a clash of swords. It was a collision of cultures, religions, and egos, all vying for supremacy in a land where the arid winds whispered tales of glory and doom. Richard's journey to the Holy Land was like a medieval soap opera, complete with detours and dramatic subplots. Take Cyprus, for instance, a pit stop that turned into a full-blown conquest. It was 1191, and Richard's fleet, a floating armada of ambition, was battered by storms, washing up on the shores of Cyprus. Cue the entrance of Isaac Comnenus, the island's self-proclaimed emperor who managed to rub Richard the wrong way. Perhaps Isaac thought he was meeting a weary traveller, but Richard, never one to miss an opportunity, decided to add Cyprus to his trophy cabinet. In a blitzkrieg of medieval efficiency, he conquered the island in about as much time as it takes to binge a TV series, 1 week. For good measure, threw in a royal wedding, marrying Berengaria of Navarre. It's not every day you get married and annex an island in the same breath. With Cyprus secured, Richard's focus turned to the Holy Land, where the real action awaited. The Siege of Acre was the Third Crusade's opening act, and a logistical nightmare that makes modern supply chain issues look like child's play. Acre was a fortified city on the Mediterranean coast, and it had become the focal point of the Crusader effort. Picture thousands of troops, a veritable United Nations of medieval warriors, converging on a city that had become a crucible of conflict. Richard arrived in June 1191, joining forces with Philip Roman II of France, because what's a crusade without a bit of European camaraderie and rivalry? The siege was a veritable who's who of medieval might, with Richard and Philip trying to outdo each other in military prowess and tactical brilliance. The Crusaders, clad in armor and driven by zeal, faced off against Saladin's seasoned forces, who were determined to defend their territory. Acre's walls were a formidable challenge, and the siege dragged on for months, with both sides enduring the medieval equivalent of trench warfare. Disease was a constant companion, with dysentery and fever cutting down men faster than enemy arrows. It was a grim reminder that the romance of the crusading knight often masked a brutal reality. Yet, Richard's reputation as a military genius was not without merit. His strategic acumen during the siege was undeniable. He orchestrated a relentless assault that eventually broke the stalemate, forcing Acre to surrender in July 1191. It was a hard-won victory, but not without its share of controversy. Richard's decision to execute thousands of Muslim prisoners was a brutal act that sent shockwaves across Christendom and the Islamic world alike. It was a stark illustration of how the line between chivalric heroism and ruthless pragmatism was often razor-thin. With Acre secured, Richard set his sights on Jerusalem, the ultimate prize. Yet, despite his victories, his relationship with Philip Roman II was deteriorating faster than a medieval alliance could say, backstab. Philip, perhaps tired of playing second fiddle, decided to pack up and head back to France, leaving Richard to carry the crusading banner alone. It was a classic case of medieval office politics, where alliances were as fickle as the winds of the Levant. The rivalry between Richard and Saladin was the stuff of legend, a medieval showdown that has captured imaginations for centuries. Saladin, known for his chivalry and tactical brilliance, was a formidable adversary. The two never met in battle directly, but their strategic maneuvers were a chess game played with armies, each move calculated to test the other's resolve. Richard's forces advanced towards Jerusalem, but he faced logistical challenges that would make any modern general break into a cold sweat. Supply lines stretched thin desert heat, sapping the strength of men and horses alike, and the specter of disease never far from the ranks. Despite his dream of capturing Jerusalem, Richard's pragmatism eventually won out. Realizing the city's defenses were too strong and his forces too depleted, he made the controversial decision to retreat. It was a move that baffled and disappointed many, yet it was a testament to his strategic foresight. Richard knew that a failed assault would be catastrophic, and so he chose to fortify his positions along the coast instead. It was a decision that underscored the complex realities of crusading, where idealism often had to bow to practicality. Richard's time in the Holy Land was marked by a series of engagements with Saladin's forces, including the Battle of Arsuf, one of his most significant victories. On September 7, 1191, near the coastal city of Arsuf, Richard's forces clashed with Saladin's army in a fierce battle that showcased his tactical genius. Richard's cavalry charge, a masterstroke of timing and precision, broke the Muslim lines and secured a decisive victory. It was a moment that solidified his reputation as a lion on the battlefield, a commander whose presence could turn the tide of war. Yet, even as he basked in the glory of victory, Richard's gaze was always fixed on the horizon. His time in the Holy Land was a delicate balance of warfare and diplomacy, with truces and skirmishes marking the ebb and flow of the crusade. The Treaty of Jaffa, negotiated in 1192, was a pragmatic end to Richard's campaign, allowing Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem while leaving the city under Muslim control. It was a piece of compromise, a recognition that even the most lion-hearted ambitions must sometimes yield to the realities of the world. As Richard prepared to leave the Holy Land, his legacy as a Crusader king was cemented. He would return to Europe a legend, but also a king confronting the consequences of his absence. His adventures in the Holy Land were a microcosm of his life, a blend of ambition, heroism, and the harsh truths of medieval politics. Yet, as history has shown, the tale of Richard the Lionheart had many more chapters to unfold, each as captivating as the last. So, stay tuned as we continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of his life, where valor and vision danced on the edge of destiny. As Richard prepared to set sail from the Holy Land, he might have thought the drama of his crusade was behind him. Little did he know, the return journey would be less glorious homecoming, and more unplanned detour into medieval Netflix special. Imagine a king, fresh from the battlefields, ending up as an unwelcome guest in an Austrian duke's dungeon. It's the kind of plot twist that would make even the most seasoned screenwriter raise an eyebrow. So, here's how it all went down. Richard set off in disguise, hoping to slip back into Europe unnoticed. Unfortunately, subtlety wasn't his strong suit. He was captured near Vienna in December 1192 by Leopold V, Duke of Austria. Richard had previously annoyed Leopold during the crusade by disrespecting his flag at Acre. And let's just say, Leopold wasn't one to let bygones be bygones. Capturing Richard must have felt like winning the medieval lottery, and Leopold wasted no time cashing in his prize. And cash in he did. Richard was handed over to Emperor Henry VI of the Holy Roman Empire, who saw the potential for a hefty ransom. We're talking 150,000 marks, an astronomical sum that would make modern ransom demands look like pocket change. To put it into perspective, this was roughly 3 times the annual income of the English crown. It was as if the King of England was being held for a GDP-sized ransom. Back in England, Richard's mother, Elena of Aquitaine, was not about to let her favorite son languish in captivity. She launched a fundraising campaign that would make any modern charity drive look tame. Taxes were raised, the church was tapped for funds, and even the crown jewels were pawned. England was essentially emptied of its wealth to free a king who had spent more time gallivanting overseas than ruling from the throne. This massive payout wasn't just a financial burden, it was a political earthquake. The ransom destabilized the English economy, strained the royal coffers, and left an entire nation wondering if their king was worth the cost. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, his prolonged absences, Richard's legend only grew. His charisma and military prowess had captured the imagination of people who had never even set eyes on him. The diplomatic shenanigans surrounding Richard's release were a masterclass in medieval power games. Everyone wanted a piece of the action. The Pope got involved, condemning Leopold for imprisoning a crusader, while various European powers jockeyed for influence. It was as if the entire continent was engaged in a game of political chess, with Richard as the most valuable piece on the board. Eventually, on February 4, 1194, after more than a year in captivity, Richard was released. His return to England was less about shaking hands and kissing babies, and more about reclaiming his realm from his brother John, who had been busy plotting to take the throne. John's attempts at regency had gone about as well as a cat-herding contest, complete with chaos and the occasional betrayal. Richard's absence had cost England dearly, both economically and politically. His ransom was a staggering reminder of the personal costs of his crusading ambitions, yet the very fact that the English were willing to pay it speaks volumes about the allure of his legend. After all, who wouldn't want a king with a nickname like the Lionheart? It evokes images of bravery and nobility, even if the reality was often far more complicated. Despite the ransom's economic impact, Richard remained a figure of fascination and admiration. His military exploits had cemented his reputation as a warrior king, and legends of his chivalry and courage spread far and wide. In a world where news traveled at the speed of a horse, Richard's larger-than-life persona filled the gaps, transforming him into a medieval superstar. The tale of Richard's capture and ransom is a perfect example of how history can sometimes feel stranger than fiction. It reveals the precarious balance of power, wealth, and reputation in the medieval world, a place where a king could be both a hero and a financial liability. As Richard resumed his reign, he continued to face the daunting task of ruling a kingdom while maintaining the legend that had grown in his absence. So, was it all worth it? Did the glory of Richard's military conquests justify the enormous price paid for his freedom? These are questions that history continues to ponder. Richard's life was a testament to the complexities of leadership in a time when the line between legend and reality was as blurred as the horizon at sea. But his story doesn't end here. There's still more to unravel, more to explore in the life of the king who captured the world's imagination. Keep listening as the saga of Richard the Lionheart continues to unfold. As Richard the Lionheart resumed his reign in England, the kingdom was less a well-oiled machine and more a collection of squeaky wheels in desperate need of grease. Though he had been freed from his Austrian captivity, the price of his release left the English treasury echoing with the sound of empty coffers. Yet Richard was not one to let a little thing like financial ruin stand in the way of his ambitions. After all, his heart, much like his moniker, was set on battle, not balance sheets. Richard spent less than a year in England after his release, which, given his track record, was practically a lifetime. In March 1194, he set sail again for France, where the real action was brewing. The Angevin Empire, that patchwork quilt of territories stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees, was under threat from Philip Roman II of France, an ambitious monarch who had developed a taste for Richard's continental holdings. It was like a medieval version of monopoly, and Richard wasn't about to let Philip collect on his territories without a fight. The next 5 years of Richard's life were a whirlwind of military campaigns in France, as he sought to defend and consolidate his holdings. The battles were as brutal as they were frequent, with Richard's tactical brilliance on full display. His military acumen was undeniable, a testament to his knack for turning complex battle scenarios into chess matches where he always seemed to hold the better pieces. Yet, this wasn't just about flexing military muscle. It was about maintaining the power and prestige of the Angevin Empire, a task as Herculean as it was Sisyphean. In these final years, Richard's life was a relentless cycle of sieges and skirmishes. He was a king who preferred the clang of swords to the clamour of court politics, and his absence from England was as conspicuous as ever. His focus was on France, where his campaigns against Philip Roman II saw him gain ground, lose it, and gain it back again in a dizzying dance of medieval warfare. It was a reminder that in the high-stakes world of medieval geopolitics, today's victory could quickly become tomorrow's defeat. Despite the chaos and bloodshed, Richard remained a larger-than-life figure, his legend growing with each battle. The Lionheart was more than just a nickname. It was an identity that resonated across Christendom. Yet, beneath the veneer of heroism, lay a man whose decisions were often as impulsive as they were strategic. His temper was as legendary as his courage, leading to decisions that were sometimes more rash than reasoned. It was this combination of bravery and brashness that made him both a formidable leader and a flawed human being. In the spring of 1199, fate dealt Richard a hand that no amount of military prowess could counter. While laying siege to the small but strategically significant castle of Chalice Chabrol in Limousin, Richard met his untimely end. It was March 26, 1199, when a crossbow bolt, fired by a defender perched on the castle walls, struck him in the shoulder. The wound was not immediately fatal, but infection set in, a grim reminder of the medieval world's limited medical knowledge. By April 6, Richard had succumbed to gangrene, his life extinguished in a way that seemed almost mundane given the grandiosity of his exploits. Richard's death at the age of 41 marked the end of an era, but not the end of his legend. His heart was buried at Rouen, his entrails at Chalice, and his body at the feet of his father in Fontevraud Abbey, a fittingly fragmented resting place for a king whose life was spent in constant motion. The circumstances of his death added a poignant note to the myth of the Lionheart, the fearless warrior brought low not by an army, but by a single arrow. And so, we come to the legacy of Richard the Lionheart. The myth of the Lionheart is as enduring as it is embellished, a tapestry of tales woven from threads of truth and exaggeration. Richard was undoubtedly a military genius, a charismatic leader who inspired loyalty and fear in equal measure. His exploits in the Holy Land and on the battlefields of France cemented his reputation as a warrior king. Yet, his reign was also marked by absenteeism, financial strain, and a focus on continental pursuits that left England itself relatively neglected. Why does the myth of the Lionheart endure? Perhaps it's because Richard, with his larger-than-life persona, fits the mold of the chivalric hero so perfectly. In a world hungry for tales of valor and nobility, the story of a king who fought with the heart of a lion was irresistible. The reality, of course, was far more complex. Richard's reign was a testament to the harsh realities of medieval rule, where the quest for power often overshadowed the needs of the people. If we view Richard's life through a modern lens, it becomes clear that his legacy is a double-edged sword. On one hand, his military achievements and charismatic leadership deserve admiration. On the other, his relentless pursuit of glory came at a significant cost, both financially and politically. Richard was a king who lived for the battlefield, but his absence from the throne room left a kingdom burdened by debt and instability. Ultimately, Richard the Lionheart remains a figure of fascination, a testament to the enduring power of myth in shaping historical narrative. His life was a blend of courage and chaos, a saga of ambition that continues to captivate. As we conclude this journey through the life of Richard I, we are left with the realization that, in the end, the line between legend and reality is as elusive as ever. The Lionheart roared fiercely in his time, and though his voice is now silent, his legacy echoes through the corridors of history, a reminder that while kings may fall, legends endure. In the bustling, sun-soaked chaos of ancient Alexandria, you might have found a young Cleopatra, perhaps not yet ruling Egypt, but already making waves in her own right. Born in 69 B.C., Cleopatra Roman 7 Philopator was the daughter of Ptolemy Roman 12 Auletes, known less affectionately as the flute player, a name that might have sounded more musical had his reign not been marked by debt and instability. Now, Cleopatra's family, the Ptolemaic dynasty, made the Kardashians look like the Brady Bunch. They had a penchant for drama, sibling rivalries, and just a dash of familial homicide, all in the name of holding onto power. The Ptolemaic dynasty, originally Greek, had ruled Egypt since the death of Alexander the Great in 323 B.C. Now, you think they'd have picked up a bit of Egyptian culture along the way. But these folks were more about keeping it Greek, at least until Cleopatra came along. She was the first of her line to learn the Egyptian language, a smart move considering she was ruling Egyptians. Talk about understanding your audience, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Cleopatra's early life was a masterclass in political maneuvering and family dysfunction. The Ptolemies had a unique way of keeping power all in the family. Sibling marriages were the norm, and you can bet the family reunions were awkward. Cleopatra herself would later marry not one, but two of her brothers. Think of it as the ancient world's version of keeping it local. Let's set the scene. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy Roman XII, was a bit of a hot mess when it came to ruling. His reign was essentially an economic dumpster fire. He was so in debt to Rome that he might as well have handed over the keys to the palace. In fact, at one point, he was ousted and had to flee to Rome to beg for assistance. Cleopatra was around 11 years old when she witnessed her father's desperate attempts to reclaim his throne. Imagine the lessons in diplomacy and survival she picked up from watching that political circus. Now, Cleopatra wasn't just a pretty face with a knack for eyeliner. She was a linguistic prodigy and reportedly spoke 9 languages, including Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, and Aramaic. While most of her Ptolemaic predecessors couldn't be bothered to learn Egyptian, Cleopatra's multilingual talents made her a savvy stateswoman, being able to address your subjects in their tongue tends to win you some brownie points. Here's a fun tidbit. Cleopatra was educated at the Library of Alexandria, the most famous knowledge hub of the ancient world. Picture this: thousands of scrolls, hundreds of scholars, and one ambitious young woman soaking it all up. It's often said that knowledge is power, and Cleopatra was amassing it in spades, preparing for a future that would require every ounce of it. Now, before we get too caught up in the grandeur of Cleopatra's education, let's remember that her early life was far from a fairy tale. The political climate in Egypt was a pressure cooker of Roman influence, internal dissent, and economic strife. Cleopatra's family wasn't exactly beloved by their subjects or their Roman overlords. The Ptolemies were seen as foreign rulers in Egypt, and their hold on power was as tenuous as a toga at a bacchanal. Cleopatra watched her father navigate these treacherous waters, learning what not to do as much as what might actually work. It was a time when alliances were as fragile as papyrus, and trust was a rare commodity. Cleopatra would have to be as cunning as a cobra to maintain her grip on power in the years to come. So, while her early life may have been filled with the trappings of royalty, Cleopatra was no stranger to the harsh realities of political life. She was a product of her environment, an environment that demanded she be more than just a figurehead. She needed to be a ruler who could charm the most powerful empire in the world while keeping her own people in check. And for that, she had to be more than just Cleopatra. She had to be the last pharaoh of Egypt. Cleopatra was about to take center stage in a world where the stakes were higher than the pyramids. Stay tuned. Cleopatra was about to take center stage in a world where the stakes were higher than the pyramids. And she wasn't stepping into the spotlight alone. She had a Roman entourage that would make any rock star jealous. Enter Julius Caesar, Rome's most charming dictator with a penchant for crossing rivers and Rubicons. But how did Cleopatra, a young queen in a faltering dynasty, manage to catch the eye of the most powerful man in the world? Cleopatra's ascent to the throne was a masterclass in political savvy and familial ruthlessness. When her father, Ptolemy Roman XII, shuffled off this mortal coil in 51 B.C., he left behind a will that screamed family drama. He named Cleopatra, then just 18, and her younger brother, Ptolemy Roman XIII, as co-rulers. Now, if you think co-ruling with a teenage brother sounds like a recipe for disaster, you'd be right. It's like giving 2 kids the keys to the candy store and expecting them not to gorge themselves. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the siblings were at each other's throats, politically speaking. The relationship between Cleopatra and Ptolemy Roman XIII soured faster than milk left out in the Egyptian sun. Cleopatra was ousted from power, forced to flee to Syria in 48 B.C., a move that left her plotting a comeback that would make a Hollywood screenwriter proud. Cue the entrance of Julius Caesar, who arrived in Alexandria hot on the heels of his victory over Pompey. The Roman general was in the city to settle some debts, political and financial, owed by the Ptolemaic dynasty. Now, Cleopatra wasn't the type to miss an opportunity. Legend has it that she had herself smuggled into Caesar's quarters rolled up in a rug. a scene that sounds more like a Vegas magic act than a diplomatic maneuver. Whether it was a rug or a more mundane means of entry, Cleopatra's arrival was theatrical, and it worked. She and Caesar struck a deal, one that was mutually beneficial. Cleopatra would get the throne, and Caesar would get a hefty Egyptian IOU repaid, along with a powerful ally in the East. Their partnership was more than just political, it was personal. Cleopatra and Caesar became lovers, a fact that scandalized Rome but solidified Cleopatra's position in Egypt. By the time they were done, Cleopatra was back on the throne, and Ptolemy Roman 13 was swimming with the fishes, quite literally, after drowning in the Nile during a skirmish. Cleopatra, now ruling alongside her even younger brother, Ptolemy Roman 14, had achieved what few thought possible. She had outmaneuvered her rivals and secured her position as Egypt's queen. But Cleopatra wasn't just in it for the power plays. Her alliance with Caesar had significant economic implications. With Rome's support, Egypt's economy, previously a sinking ship, began to stabilize. The Nile Delta became a breadbasket not just for Egypt but for Rome, a critical supplier of grain that kept the Roman masses fed and, crucially, kept Caesar in favor with his people. Cleopatra knew that in politics, as in life, a full belly often leads to a favorable opinion. Cleopatra's savvy didn't stop there. By aligning with Caesar, she also gained a measure of protection against external threats. Rome was the ancient equivalent of a nuclear deterrent. No neighboring king or rebellious faction would dare challenge her, knowing she had the backing of Rome's legions. Cleopatra was playing the long game, and her strategy was paying dividends. Yet, Cleopatra's relationship with Julius Caesar wasn't without its complexities. While Roman society might have been scandalized by Caesar's dalliance with the Egyptian queen, the Romans couldn't deny her intelligence and charisma. Cleopatra was the first Ptolemaic ruler who could speak to the Roman elite in their own tongue, and not just in Latin, but in the language of politics and power. She was a diplomat as much as she was a monarch, always one step ahead in the diplomatic dance. But just when Cleopatra's fortune seemed secure, the tides of Roman politics began to shift. Julius Caesar, despite his many talents, couldn't dodge daggers forever. On the Ides of March, 44 B.C., Caesar met his end at the hands of his own senators. It was a seismic event, one that sent shockwaves across the Mediterranean, all the way to Cleopatra's court in Alexandria. With Caesar gone, Cleopatra's position was once again precarious. The Roman world was in chaos, and Cleopatra found herself needing to navigate these treacherous waters without her most powerful ally. Yet, ever the strategist, Cleopatra knew that survival meant adapting. She set her sights on the new power players in Rome, famously forming a liaison with Mark Antony, a man who was as much a showman as he was a soldier. But that's a story for another day. For now, Cleopatra had achieved the impossible, had risen from political exile to become the Queen of Egypt, thanks in part to her alliances with Rome's most powerful figures. Cleopatra wasn't just surviving in a male-dominated world. She was thriving, rewriting the rules of the political game as she went. The stakes might have been astronomical, but Cleopatra was nothing if not a high roller in the grand casino of ancient politics, and the dice were still rolling. And so, the dice kept rolling for Cleopatra, who was about to embark on a partnership that would make her previous alliances look like mere dress rehearsals. Enter Mark Antony, Rome's resident bad boy, famed for his military prowess and his love of life's pleasures. Wine, women, and a bit of theatrical flair. If Julius Caesar was the calculating statesman, Antony was the charismatic warrior, the kind of figure who could rally troops with a rousing speech one minute and throw a raucous party the next. Cleopatra and Antony's relationship has been immortalized as one of history's great love stories, the kind that makes for epic poetry in blockbuster films. But let's pump the brakes on the romance train and take a closer look at the brass tacks of this legendary liaison. Was it love, lust, or a brilliant political strategy wrapped in the guise of passion? Spoiler alert. It was a little bit of everything, served with a side of ambition. By the time Antony and Cleopatra crossed paths in 41 B.C., the Roman world was, to put it mildly, a hot mess. Following Caesar's assassination, Rome was divided between his supporters and those who had plunged the daggers. Antony, part of the second triumvirate alongside Octavian, later Augustus and Lepidus, controlled the eastern provinces. And Cleopatra, Well, she controlled the purse strings and the grain supplies, essential to feeding a hungry Roman populace. Talk about a match made in political heaven. Their first meeting in Tarsus was nothing short of theatrical. Cleopatra knew the power of a grand entrance, arriving on a barge adorned like Aphrodite herself, sails of purple billowing in the breeze, the air thick with the scent of incense. Antony, never one to shy away from spectacle, was reportedly dazzled. Cleopatra's understanding of optics was as sharp as any sword. She knew Antony needed her resources just as much as she needed his military muscle. And so, their partnership, equal parts romance and realpolitik, was born. From this union came 3 children, Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. But let's not kid ourselves. Theirs was as much a union of interests as it was of any personal affection. Cleopatra needed a Roman protector, and Antony needed Egypt's wealth to fund his military campaigns. It was a symbiotic relationship wrapped in the trappings of love, a testament to Cleopatra's ability to play the game at the highest stakes. Now, let's not forget Octavian, lurking in the wings like a hawk, eyeing his prey. As Antony and Cleopatra built their life in Alexandria, he was busy consolidating his power back in Rome. Octavian was no fan of Antony's dalliance with Cleopatra, seeing it as both a political and personal affront. The gossip mills of Rome churned out tales of Antony's decadence in Egypt, a narrative Octavian was more than happy to feed. For him, Cleopatra was the exotic femme fatale, the foreign queen who had ensnared a Roman general. The propaganda war between Octavian and Antony was as fierce as any battlefield. Octavian portrayed Antony as a man bewitched by Cleopatra, abandoning his Roman duties for an Egyptian fantasy. Cleopatra, in Octavian's narrative, became the embodiment of Eastern decadence and corruption, the siren leading Antony, and by extension, Rome, astray. It was a masterclass in political spin, with Octavian casting himself as Rome's savior from foreign entanglements. While Antony and Cleopatra were playing house in Egypt, Octavian was playing chess, positioning himself as the future ruler of a unified Rome. By 32 B.C., things came to a head and war was declared. Antony and Cleopatra's forces faced off against Octavian's in a showdown for control of the Roman world. It was a clash of titans, with the fate of empires hanging in the balance. The Battle of Actium in 31 B.C. was the climax, a naval confrontation that would decide the future of Antony, Cleopatra, and Rome itself. Cleopatra's fleet was substantial, boasting some 500 warships, a testament to her naval acumen. But Octavian's forces, led by the capable Agrippa, were better organized and more disciplined. The battle was a disaster for Antony and Cleopatra, their forces outmaneuvered and outmatched. In the chaos, Cleopatra retreated, and Antony followed, sealing their fate. After Actium, it was only a matter of time before Octavian's forces marched on Alexandria. With their backs against the wall, Antony and Cleopatra faced their final days. Antony, believing Cleopatra had already taken her own life, fell on his sword, a tragic end for a once great general. Cleopatra, ever the strategist, attempted to negotiate with Octavian, but the writing was on the wall. Egypt was on the brink of becoming a Roman province, and Cleopatra knew her reign was over. Cleopatra's death remains shrouded in mystery and myth, the image of the queen clutching an asp more dramatic than any reality. Whether by snakebite or poison, Cleopatra chose to end her life on her own terms, a final act of defiance against a world that sought to control her. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of Roman Egypt, a new chapter in the long history of the Nile's lands. Cleopatra and Antony's story, for all its romance and tragedy, was ultimately one of power, ambition, and the harsh realities of politics. Their love affair was not just a personal relationship, but a pivotal moment in history, a reminder of the intertwining of the personal and the political, and the high stakes that come with both. As Cleopatra slipped from history into legend, she left a legacy as the last pharaoh of Egypt, a queen who played the game as fiercely as any man, and whose name would echo through the ages. The story isn't over yet, but that's a tale for another day. Cleopatra might have left the stage, but the drama of her legacy was just beginning. Stay tuned. And so, as Cleopatra slipped from history into legend, the wheels of fate were already turning for her beloved Egypt. While Antony and Cleopatra's epic drama was worthy of any Shakespearean tragedy, The real story laid bare a series of strategic blunders and economic miscalculations that sealed their doom long before the Asp allegedly made its cameo. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of the infamous Battle of Actium, the decisive naval showdown that turned the tide against our star-crossed lovers. We're talking September 2, 31 B.C., off the western coast of Greece, a picturesque setting for what was about to be a colossal maritime mess. Cleopatra and Antony had assembled a formidable fleet, around 500 ships strong, a floating fortress meant to withstand anything Octavian could throw at them. But numbers, as it turns out, aren't everything when your strategy is about as coherent as a Greek tragedy in translation. Octavian's fleet, led by his right-hand man, Agrippa, clocked in with fewer ships, about 250 to be precise. But don't let that fool you. Agrippa was the military equivalent of a chess grandmaster, and he had a trick up his toga. Faster, more maneuverable ships that could outflank and outfight the cumbersome galleys of Antony and Cleopatra. While Cleopatra's ships were built like ancient battleships, they might as well have had "Easy Target" painted on the sails. The battle was more than just a clash of ships. It was a clash of egos, strategies, and, as always, resources. Cleopatra's war chest, while deep, had been hemorrhaging gold faster than a pharaoh's tomb at the hands of grave robbers. Maintaining a fleet of that size wasn't cheap. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of burning through cash like a rock star on a Vegas bender. The cost of warfare was a colossal burden on Egypt's economy, draining the kingdom's coffers and leaving Cleopatra's treasury as empty as a broken amphora. But what about the grand myth of Cleopatra's retreat? Ah, yes, the piece de resistance of historical spin. As the battle raged, Cleopatra, seeing the writing on the wall, took her flagship and bolted, Antony trailing behind like a love-struck puppy. It's been painted as betrayal, but let's consider the reality. Cleopatra was a queen with a kingdom to protect. She wasn't just saving her own skin. She was trying to salvage what she could of Egypt's future. Unfortunately, strategic retreat doesn't have the same ring as tragic lover's flight, does it? What followed was the fallout from Actium, a domino effect of despair and destruction. Antony and Cleopatra's defeat wasn't just a military loss. It was the beginning of the end for Ptolemaic Egypt. Octavian, the calculating statesman that he was, knew that control of Egypt meant control of the grain supply, Rome's breadbasket, and a geopolitical jackpot. With the fall of Alexandria, Octavian could secure his power back home by keeping Rome's bellies full and his political rivals at bay. Talk about winning hearts through stomachs. Now, let's talk about the harsh realities behind the romantic narratives. Cleopatra's ultimate defeat was as much about economics and logistics as it was about love and betrayal. By the time Octavian's legions marched into Alexandria, Egypt's once thriving economy was as battered as its fleet. The Ptolemaic dynasty, with its penchant for lavish spending and political intrigue, was staring down the barrel of a financial collapse. It turns out, even pharaohs can't escape a balance sheet in the red. As Cleopatra faced her final days, she attempted to negotiate with Octavian. Ever the pragmatist, she sought to secure her children's future, offering the Roman everything from treasure to her own persona as a political pawn. But Octavian, the future Augustus, was playing a long game. He had no intention of leaving any loose ends. Cleopatra, as the last of the Ptolemies, was a potential rallying point for dissent. Her death, whether by snakebite or a more mundane poison, was likely less about romance and more about eliminating a political threat. The narrative of Cleopatra's tragic end is as enduring as it is dramatic, but it's also a testament to history's love affair with legend. The reality, though, is often less poetic. Cleopatra was a ruler caught between the rock of Roman ambition and the hard place of her own dynasty's decline. Her story is one of power, politics, and the inevitable march of empire, where personal relationships were as much about survival as they were about sentiment. As the sun set on Cleopatra's reign, Egypt transitioned from a proud kingdom to a province under Roman rule, marking the end of an era that had begun with Alexander the Great. The Ptolemies, once a dynasty of unrivaled power, were consigned to the annals of history. Yet, Cleopatra's legacy would endure, a fascinating blend of myth and reality that continues to captivate the world. So, while Cleopatra might have departed the stage, the echoes of her life would resonate through time, influencing everything from art to politics and leaving us with a tale as complex as the queen herself. But hold on to your laurel wreaths, because the drama of Cleopatra's legacy is far from over. The story continues as we explore how one queen's life and death shaped the world she left behind. Stay tuned, because history always has another twist waiting in the wings. As the story of Cleopatra slips into the annals of history, it's time to unravel the tangled tapestry of her legacy. A blend of fact and fiction, triumphs and tragedies, all wrapped in the allure of one of history's most enigmatic figures. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, has been a muse for countless artists, writers, and filmmakers, each reshaping a story to fit the mold of their times. But what's the real deal behind the myth? Was she the sultry seductress of Hollywood fame, or a shrewd political operator who played her cards in a game stacked against her? Let's start with the infamous myth of Cleopatra as the ultimate femme fatale. The image of Cleopatra lounging on a golden throne, bedecked in jewels, and seducing powerful men with a mere glance is tantalizing, no doubt. However, reality was far more complex. Cleopatra wasn't just about pouting lips and alluring eyes. She was a political powerhouse, a ruler who spoke multiple languages, and a strategist who understood the importance of alliances. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony were as much about securing Egypt's future as they were about romance. Cleopatra knew that in the ruthless world of ancient politics, love and power were often two sides of the same coin. The romanticized version of Cleopatra often overshadows her genuine achievements. Under her rule, Egypt remained an economic powerhouse, despite the looming shadow of Rome. Her administration managed to stabilize Egypt's economy, ensuring that the Nile's bounty flowed into Roman granaries, keeping both her subjects and Roman citizens fed. This was no small feat in a world where famine could topple empires faster than any army. Cleopatra's economic acumen was as sharp as any dagger, her policies ensuring that Egypt remained a critical player on the geopolitical chessboard. Yet, Cleopatra's legacy has been shaped by more than just her political savvy. Her life and reign became a canvas for the likes of Shakespeare, who immortalized her as the tragic heroine of Antony and Cleopatra. This depiction, while captivating, often blurs the line between history and fiction, turning Cleopatra into a figure of tragic romance rather than the astute ruler she was. Shakespeare's Cleopatra is a creature of passion and impulse, her downfall a result of love rather than the harsh realities of Roman ambition and political betrayal. But why does Cleopatra continue to fascinate us across the ages? Perhaps it's because her story is a mirror reflecting our own desires and fears. She embodies the eternal struggle between power and vulnerability, ambition and downfall. Cleopatra's life is a testament to the timelessness of human ambition, the drive to secure one's place in a world that often feels as unstable as shifting sands. Her story is both a cautionary tale and an inspiring saga of resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. In the modern world, Cleopatra's life offers lessons that resonate with today's political and social landscapes. She was a leader who understood the power of image and narrative, crafting her own legend long before public relations became a profession. Cleopatra knew the importance of controlling her own story, a lesson that echoes in a world where narratives often shape reality more than facts themselves. In an era where media spin can make or break leaders, Cleopatra's mastery of self-presentation is as relevant as ever. Moreover, Cleopatra's reign highlights the complexities of female leadership in a male-dominated world. Her story challenges the notion that women in power are outliers, showing instead that they can be as capable, cunning, and complex as their male counterparts. Cleopatra's life is a reminder that history is not just a tale of kings and conquerors, but also of queens who wielded power with grace and tenacity. Despite her untimely end, Cleopatra's legacy endures. She remains a symbol of the eternal interplay between love and power, ambition and downfall. The myths surrounding her are as much a part of her story as the reality she faced, a blend of fact and fiction that continues to captivate our imagination. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt, may have left the stage, but her legend lives on, a testament to the enduring allure of one of history's most fascinating figures. As we wrap up this journey through Cleopatra's life, it's clear that her story is more than just a tale of romance and tragedy. It's a reflection of the human condition, a saga of ambition, power, and the relentless march of time. Cleopatra reminds us that history is not just a record of what happened, but a narrative shaped by those who tell it. Her life, a blend of myth and reality, challenges us to look beyond the surface and seek the deeper truths that lie beneath. So, as you drift off to sleep, ponder the lessons of Cleopatra, the queen who dared to defy an empire and left an indelible mark on history. If you ever thought your tangled earphones were a modern-day annoyance, you're in good company. The ancient Celts, those masters of the interwoven design, would probably feel your pain, and then some. Around 450 AD, these folks were busy creating an artwork that looks like it was designed specifically to drive modern art critics insane. But these loops and spirals weren't just an excuse to show off a flair for the artistic. No, they were deeply embedded in the society and culture of the Celts, who were as obsessed with symmetry as we are with our phone screens. Now, let's get one thing straight. The Celts were not a monolithic society. They weren't sitting around in a giant hall with a big Celtic Nations Unite banner. They were a collection of tribes scattered across Europe, from the British Isles to what is now modern-day Turkey. And they were nothing if not adaptable. The origins of Celtic artwork can be traced back to these various tribal societies, each adding their own little twist, quite literally to the designs that we now recognize as quintessentially Celtic. So why the obsession with artwork? Well, the Celts had a bit of a thing for infinity. They loved the idea of eternal life, the endless cycle of nature, and presumably the never-ending saga of untangling their own hair. Their artwork reflects this fascination with the infinite, no beginning and no end in sight. The patterns they created were often used as symbols of protection and continuity, kind of like an ancient version of a good luck charm. They'd carved these intricate designs into stone crosses, jewelry and weapons, essentially branding their lives with these mystic loops. But here's a twist. While we often think of these designs as purely decorative, the Celts were no strangers to practicality. Artwork served as an early form of branding. Think about it if you're a blacksmith in 5th century Gaul. How do you let people know they're holding a genuine Mac Celt sword? You etch a distinctive knot pattern into the blade. It's like the Nike swoosh, but with more cultural heritage and less sweatshop labor. The designs themselves, those spirals and twists, weren't just about aesthetics. They were a reflection of the societal structures of the Celts, who favored a tribal system that was as interwoven as their art. Each tribe was independent, but interconnected through marriage, trade, and warfare. Artwork was a visual representation of this connectedness, a reminder that everything and everyone was part of a larger whole. And speaking of larger wholes, the Celts were big fans of symmetry. They saw it as a reflection of balance and harmony in the universe. This love for balance went beyond art and into their daily lives. Their legal systems, for instance, were surprisingly sophisticated, with laws that balanced the rights and responsibilities of individuals in a way that was, dare we say, more progressive than some modern systems. Perhaps those knots were a reminder that life itself should be balanced, a message that might still resonate today if we could just stop and untangle our earbuds long enough to listen. Still, it's worth noting that our modern fascination with Celtic artwork is often tinged with a bit of myth-making. The romanticized notion of Celts as mystical warriors draped in swirling patterns is about as accurate as a Hollywood historical epic, charming, but not entirely grounded in reality. The truth is, the Celts were a diverse and dynamic people, whose artistic contributions were just one aspect of a complex and often brutal society. So, the next time you admire a Celtic art, take a moment to appreciate the intricate web of history behind it. These designs are more than just pretty patterns. They're a testament to a people who understood the power of connection long before the age of social media. And who knows, maybe untangling your earbuds is just your way of connecting with the ancient Celts. Or maybe it's just a reminder that we all need a little more symmetry in our lives. It's a wild ride, and we dive into the cultural and spiritual significance behind Celtic symbols. Starting with the classics, Trinity Knot, or the triquetra, isn't just a pretty doodle for your next tattoo idea. This ancient symbol, with its 3 interlocking loops, is like the Swiss Army knife of Celtic iconography. It's packed with more meanings than a fortune cookie warehouse. Traditionally, the Trinity Knot is thought to represent the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit, or the 3 domains of earth, sky, and sea. In Christianity, It took on a new life, symbolizing the Holy Trinity. Talk about versatility. No wonder it found its way into everything from jewelry to church decor, making it a spiritual multitasker long before the term was invented. Meanwhile, the spiral, a simpler but equally evocative symbol, seems to say, hey, I'm ancient, but I'm also trendy. A single spiral represents growth and expansion, like the life journey we're all meandering through, hopefully with a map. Double it up, and it becomes the double spiral, which signifies balance and duality. Basically, it's the yin and yang of the Celtic world, without the need to import philosophy from the East. This was functional symbolism at its finest, a way for the Celts to express deep philosophical ideas with a flick of the wrist. Now, before we get too carried away with romanticizing these symbols, let's pump the brakes. While the Celts were undoubtedly spiritual, attributing profound philosophical meaning to every symbol might be a bit of a stretch. It's like assuming every modern logo is loaded with existential depth. Sometimes it's just a darn good design. But here's where it gets interesting. These symbols were more than spiritual markers. They were also a social currency, a way to show off your status and beliefs without uttering a single word. Think of them as the Instagram posts of their time, complete with filters that screamed, "Look at me, I'm connected to the divine." And speaking of social currency, let's debunk a pervasive myth. The idea that every Celt was wandering around like a walking tapestry of tattoos. Sure, they had body art, but the extent and purpose were far less uniform than modern tattoo parlors might suggest. Not every Celtic warrior was inked head to toe in intricate knotwork. In fact, the idea of tattoos as a widespread practice comes more from Roman propaganda than Celtic tradition. The Romans, ever the dramatists, loved to portray the Celts as wild and untamed, covered in war paint and tattoos. It was their way of saying, "Look at these barbarians," while conveniently forgetting their own penchant for excess and spectacle. Fast forward to today, and Celtic symbols have taken on a whole new life in the realm of New Age spirituality and body art. They adorn everything from yoga studios to biceps, often stripped of their original context and imbued with all sorts of modern meanings. It's the ultimate cultural remix, where historical accuracy takes a backseat to personal interpretation. But let's face it, who hasn't been tempted to get a Trinity knot tattoo after a deep dive into Celtic mythology, even if their only connection to the Celts is a penchant for Guinness? Yet, as we marvel at these enduring designs, let's not forget the economic and social factors at play. The Celtic tribes weren't just a bunch of artists lounging around crafting symbols all day. They were engaged in trade, warfare, and diplomacy, using these symbols as markers of identity and allegiance. Picture a chieftain's shield emblazoned with a distinctive knot, a clear signal of his tribe's strength and heritage. It was both a warning and an invitation, a way to say, join us or face us. This brings us to the real Celtic twist. These symbols weren't just about the spiritual or the aesthetic. They were practical tools in a world where survival often depended on alliances and reputations. In the brutal reality of tribal Europe, displaying your tribe's symbols was like flying your nation's flag, a statement of unity and strength. And in a society where oral tradition was king, these symbols were a visual language, telling stories and conveying messages that words alone couldn't capture. So while it's easy to get lost in the romantic allure of Celtic knotwork, let's remember that these designs were born from a complex interplay of culture, economy, and survival. The Celts were a people who understood the power of symbols long before the age of advertising and branding. They knew how to weave their stories and beliefs into every aspect of their lives, creating a legacy that still captivates us today. As we continue to unravel the intricate web of Celtic history, we'll discover even more about how these symbols shaped a civilization and continue to shape ours. While we've been busy unraveling the cultural tapestry of Celtic knotwork, let's not forget to tip our hats to the unsung heroes of this intricate art, the artisans. Picture this, or rather, don't just picture it. Feel the calluses forming on your hands as you painstakingly carve delicate twists into stone or metal. These skilled craftsmen were the medieval world's equivalent of rock stars, minus the leather pants and groupies. Their artistry wasn't just a hobby. It was a livelihood that demanded precision, patience, and a keen eye for detail. Now, crafting these mesmerizing knots wasn't exactly a weekend DIY project. It required top-notch materials. Think high-quality metals for jewelry or durable stone for monuments. The cost of these raw materials wasn't pocket change. For even a modest piece, you were looking at silver or gold, priced at a premium in a world where a single gold coin could feed a family for months. And the artisans, they were the original freelance gig workers, hopping from patron to patron, plying their trade in an economy where bartering was often more common than currency exchange. But don't be fooled. These artisans weren't just any old blacksmiths pounding away in a smoky forge. Oh no, these were the trendsetters of their age, the ones who could make or break a chieftain's reputation with a single, expertly crafted torque. In the Celtic hierarchy of cool, having a renowned artisan on your payroll was like scoring front-row tickets to the medieval Met Gala. These craftsmen were the creators of the ultimate status symbols, marking their patrons as men, or occasionally women, of taste and power. And speaking of power, let's talk about the monks. Yes, the monks. While we often imagine them cloistered away in silent contemplation, these were the original hipster artisans, turning their scriptoriums into workshops of intricate design. With shaving habits that would make any modern-day barber proud, they were the guardians of artistic tradition, preserving and evolving Celtic knotwork even as Europe plunged into the so-called Dark Ages. Monasteries weren't just spiritual havens. They were bustling centers of learning and craftsmanship, where monks painstakingly copied texts and illuminated manuscripts with knotwork that would make even a modern graphic designer weep with envy. These monks, with their tonsured heads and ink-stained fingers, were the epitome of medieval multitasking. They combined the roles of artist, educator, and spiritual guide, creating works that were as much about divine inspiration as they were about human skill. Their illuminated texts weren't just religious artifacts. They were the medieval equivalent of viral content, spreading the intricate beauty of Celtic design across the continent. But let's not romanticize it too much. For every monk artistically lost in a sea of swirling designs, there were countless others laboring over mundane tasks, like copying the same psalm for the umpteenth time while dreaming of more artistic endeavors. It was a life of discipline and devotion, where the line between spiritual practice and artistic creation was as intertwined as the knots themselves. Now, you might be wondering, did all these knots and spirals actually drive the economy, or were they just medieval vanity projects? The answer, as often in history, is a bit of both. On one hand, the demand for these intricate designs did create a thriving market for skilled artisans, who were sought after by everyone from tribal leaders to religious institutions. On the other hand, the resources and labor involved were significant, and not every piece commissioned was destined to be a masterpiece. In some cases, the economic impact was more about prestige than profit, with patrons willing to invest heavily in art that proclaimed their status, even if it didn't directly fill their coffers. The Celtic approach to knotwork was, therefore, both an economic driver and a cultural statement. It was a bold declaration of identity and faith, a tangible link to a heritage that was as much about survival as it was about aesthetics. In a world where alliances could shift as quickly as the tides, these symbols served as enduring markers of who you were and where you came from. They were the medieval equivalent of a family crest, a symbol of continuity in a time of constant change. As we untangle the threads of this historical tapestry, it becomes clear that Celtic knotwork was more than just a decorative art form. It was a powerful tool in the hands of skilled craftsmen, and a potent symbol in the eyes of a society that understood the value of connection, both in art and in life. These knots, with their endless loops and intricate patterns, remind us that history is not just a series of events, but a complex web of human experiences, each one interwoven with the next. So, while we may never fully decipher the mysteries of every knot or spiral, we can appreciate the artistry and the economy that made them possible. These designs are more than just relics of a bygone era. They're a testament to the enduring human spirit, a reminder that even in the midst of chaos, there is beauty to be found in the intricate dance of life. As we continue our journey through the world of Celtic art, we'll discover more about how these symbols shaped a civilization, and how they continue to captivate our imaginations today. While we've been busy unraveling the Celtic knotwork tapestry, let's shift gears and hop aboard the trade caravan as it meanders through the cobblestone streets of ancient Europe. leaving behind a legacy of loops and spirals. You see, nartwork wasn't just a Celtic party trick. It was a cultural stowaway, spreading its intricate beauty across Europe with all the subtlety of a social media trend. And much like today's viral content, it fed on trade and conquest to travel far and wide. The Roman Empire, that colossal juggernaut of civilization, wasn't just about roads and gladiators. It was a veritable melting pot of cultures, ideas, and yes, nartwork. As Roman legions marched across Europe, they didn't just leave behind a trail of aqueducts and amphitheaters. They also carried with them the art and symbols of the peoples they conquered, like cultural postcards sent back home. The Romans, never ones to shy away from a good idea, saw the charm in these Celtic designs and began incorporating them into their own art and architecture. It was like an imperial Pinterest board, where the best of conquered cultures were borrowed, adapted, and sometimes outright copied. But let's not kid ourselves. This wasn't some peace and love cultural exchange fair. The Romans had a knack for appropriation, and they wore it like a badge of honor. They took Celtic nartwork and added their own imperial twist, sometimes literally, as they incorporated these designs into mosaics, frescoes, and even military insignia. The Roman affinity for order and symmetry found an unlikely ally in the chaotic elegance of Celtic patterns. It was a case of opposites attracting, an artistic odd couple that would have made for a great reality show. As trade routes expanded, nartwork slipped quietly into the art of other cultures, like a polite guest who overstays their welcome but brings the best snacks. The Germanic tribes, for instance, weren't immune to its allure. They began to weave these designs into their own art, perhaps as a way to show off their connection to the wider world. It was a visual shout-out that said, "We're not just about longboats and mead. We've got style." Speaking of boats, let's talk about the Vikings. Now, these seafaring adventurers were the original globetrotters, raiding and trading from the coasts of North America to the rivers of Russia. They encountered Celtic designs during their raids on the British Isles and Scandinavia, and boy, did they love a good nart. The Vikings, with their flair for the dramatic, didn't just adopt these patterns, they practically married them. They carved nartwork into the prows of their ships, the hilts of their swords, and even the stones marking their burial mounds. It was as if they thought, why stop at plundering gold and silver when you can also snag some killer design ideas? The intertwining of Viking and Celtic art is a testament to the power of cultural exchange, albeit one that often involved a fair bit of pillaging. But let's not romanticize the Viking lifestyle too much. These were people who used human skulls as drinking vessels, after all. Yet, their appreciation for nartwork speaks to a universal truth. Even the most hardened warriors couldn't resist a good pattern when they saw one. Now, if you're thinking this all sounds a bit like a medieval version of cultural appropriation, you're not wrong. But unlike modern times, where appropriation often sparks controversy, back then it was a sign of respect and admiration. Incorporating another culture's art was a way of saying, "We see you. We like what you're doing. Let's mix it up." It's a reminder that cultural borrowing is as old as history itself, driven by both admiration and the practical realities of conquest and trade. And what about the economic implications? Well, just like today's designers clamor for the latest trends, artisans across Europe found themselves in demand for their nartwork skills. This wasn't just about artistic expression. It was a booming business. With the spread of these designs came the need for skilled craftsmen who could replicate and innovate, creating a market that spanned across miles and cultures. It's the age-old story of supply and demand, played out in the workshops and marketplaces of medieval Europe. But let's pump the brakes on the notion that every European artisan was a master of the Celtic nart. The reality was far more nuanced. While some artists became adept at these designs, others struggled to capture their complexity, resulting in variations that were as diverse as the cultures they sprang from. It's a bit like the game of telephone, where the original message gets a little muddled with each retelling. Yet, it was this very process of adaptation and reinterpretation that ensured the survival and evolution of nartwork across the centuries. As we trace the path of these designs through history, it's clear that nartwork was more than just an art form. It was a cultural ambassador, bridging gaps between peoples and leaving a legacy of interconnectedness. In a world where tribal identity often defined friend from foe, These patterns were a reminder of the shared human experience, a visual language that transcended borders and spoke to the universal appreciation of beauty and complexity. So, while artwork may have started as a uniquely Celtic expression, it quickly became a common thread in the tapestry of European art. It's a story of resilience and adaptation, where the lines between cultural exchange and appropriation blur, creating a rich mosaic of history that continues to captivate us today. And as we continue our journey through the world of Celtic art, we'll uncover even more about how these symbols shaped a civilization, and how they continue to leave their mark on ours. And so, as we trace the evolution of Celtic artwork from ancient tribal art to a pan-European sensation, we arrive at the doorstep of our modern world, where these arts have undergone yet another transformation. Once tools of tribal identity and spiritual expression, they've now been repurposed as global symbols of cool. But how did these loops and spirals morph into the shorthand for all things Irish? And why do we find them plastered on everything from wedding rings to corporate logos? Let's start with a little historical whiplash. Jump back to the 19th century when the Celtic revival movement began to stir. It was a time when Ireland, seeking to assert its national identity against the backdrop of British rule, turned to its ancient past for inspiration. Celtic art, with its enigmatic artwork, became a rallying cry for cultural pride. Suddenly, those intricate designs weren't just eye candy. They were emblems of defiance and identity. Think of it as the original rebranding before hashtags and viral marketing took over. Fast forward to today, and Celtic arts have become as synonymous with Ireland as shamrocks and Guinness. But let's pause for a second. Are we truly honoring these ancient symbols, or are we just slapping them on t-shirts and calling it a day? In the globalized world, where 1 in every 5 people claims some Irish ancestry, it's no surprise that these designs have become visual ambassadors for all things Emerald Isle. Yet, there's an irony here. Many who proudly sport these designs might not know the first thing about their origins. It's like wearing a band t-shirt without knowing a single song. Now, let's talk numbers. The global Celtic jewelry market alone is worth an estimated $1 billion annually. That's a lot of artwork. From New York to New Delhi, people are snapping up these designs faster than you can say, slained. But this commercial success raises the question, are these ancient designs being respected or simply commodified? In fashion, Celtic arts pop up everywhere. They're etched into silver wedding bands, embroidered on the latest high-fashion gowns, and even inked onto the skin of celebrities who may just think they look cool. It's a far cry from the spiritual and tribal significance they once held. Consider the corporate world, where logos are the new coat of arms. Many companies have co-opted Celtic designs to project an image of tradition, continuity, and trust. It's a branding strategy that works, but it also dilutes the original intent of these symbols. What once was a mark of tribal allegiance now serves as a slick marketing ploy. But let's not get too cynical. Even in this commercialized form, the arts still carry a certain mystique, a promise of depth and history that can't be easily replicated by modern design. But here's where it gets really interesting. While these symbols are being used in ways the ancient Celts could never have imagined, there's a new wave of artists and historians who are committed to reclaiming their true meaning. Through workshops, exhibitions, and digital platforms, they're peeling back the layers of commercialization to reveal the rich tapestry of history beneath. It's a renaissance of authenticity in a world often more concerned with aesthetics than substance. Now, let's not pretend that everyone's on board with this cultural revival. For many, the appeal of Celtic artwork lies precisely in its ambiguity. It's a blank canvas onto which anyone can project their own meanings, from the deeply spiritual to the purely decorative. And perhaps that's the secret to its enduring appeal. These arts, with their infinite loops and endless possibilities, invite each generation to find their own connection, to weave their own stories into the ancient patterns. So, as we wrap up our journey through the world of Celtic artwork, let's reflect on the legacy these designs leave behind. They're more than just pretty patterns. They're a testament to human creativity and adaptability. From tribal societies to modern metropolises, they've woven their way into the fabric of our culture, reminding us of the universal desire for connection and continuity. And while the world changes at a breakneck pace, these ancient arts stand as a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the most complex designs can begin with a single, simple thread. In the end, Celtic knightwork is a bit like life itself, full of twists and turns, some planned, others unexpected, but always leading us forward in a dance as old as time. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest legacy of all. The Etruscans were the kind of people who made you wonder how a civilization so influential could be so underrated. Nestled in the heart of what's now Italy, these folks were crafting architectural marvels way before the Romans started strutting around in togas. Think 900 BCE to 100 BCE, a cozy little span of time when the Etruscans were essentially setting the stage for the Roman Empire's future glory. And yet, most people chat about them like they are some shadowy footnote in history. But let's clear that up, because if you think Rome was impressive, wait till you get a load of the Etruscans. First off, let's talk geography. The Etruscans held court in a region largely overlapping with modern-day Tuscany, Umbria, and Lazio. Imagine a map of Italy. The Etruscans were hanging out right in the boot's calf muscle, strategically positioned between the glitzy Greek colonies in the south and the less sophisticated tribes of the north. This prime real estate not only gave them access to trade routes, but also a front-row seat to cultural exchanges that would later influence their southern neighbors, the Romans. Now, on to their engineering genius. When you think of arches and aqueducts, it's usually Rome that gets all the applause. But spoiler alert, the Etruscans were the real OGs of these architectural wonders. They were slinging stones into perfect arches before it was even a twinkle in Caesar's eye. The arch was their piece de resistance, and they used it to build bridges and sewers that could handle more traffic than a Roman chariot race. The Cloaca Maxima, one of the world's earliest sewage systems, owes its existence to Etruscan innovation. Talk about a civilization ahead of its time. They were solving urban plumbing issues, while the rest of Europe was still figuring out how to keep their fires lit. The aqueducts. Yeah, Etruscan handiwork, too. They constructed these engineering marvels to bring water from distant sources straight into their cities, laying down a blueprint that the Romans would later replicate and perfect. The Romans took this Etruscan concept and ran with it like a kid with a new toy, expanding it to a scale that would supply water to over 1 million people in ancient Rome at its height. But let's not stop at their love for arches and aqueducts. The Etruscans were also urban planning wizards. They laid out their cities in grid patterns, something the Romans would later adopt and claim as their own. These city grids were practical masterpieces, designed to streamline everything from traffic to trade, with main roads aligned to the cardinal points. This kind of foresight in urban planning was like having a GPS in the 5th century BCE. And while the Romans might have polished the concept, it's clear they were standing on the shoulders of Etruscan giants. Speaking of giants, it's a bit of a myth that the Etruscans were some enigmatic, obscure group that left no mark on history. Sure, their language remains a bit of a head-scratcher, but their influence on Roman architecture, politics, and culture is undeniable. They were the unsung heroes of the ancient world, crafting the blueprints for what would become Rome's architectural legacy. If you've ever marveled at the Colosseum, you've got the Etruscans to thank for setting the foundation, literally and figuratively. So, next time someone waxes lyrical about Roman arches or pontificates about aqueducts, you can nod knowingly and say, "Ah, yes, but have you heard of the Etruscans?" Because while the Romans might have built an empire, the Etruscans were the ones who taught them how to build the world. And speaking of teaching the Romans how to build the world, let's put the spotlight on the Etruscans' piece de resistance, the Cloaca Maxima. This ancient sewage system was constructed in the 6th century BCE and is still in use today in Rome. Yes, you heard that right. Over 2 millennia later, it's still doing its job. Talk about durability. The Cloaca Maxima was a marvel of engineering that the Romans inherited and expanded upon. But it was the Etruscans who first envisioned a grand solution to their urban waste woes. Now, the name Cloaca Maxima might sound a bit like a spell out of a Harry Potter book, but in reality, it was more about dealing with the less glamorous aspects of city life. Imagine ancient Rome bustling with people, markets, and, well, a lot of waste. Without a sewage system, the streets would have been less grandeur of Rome and more stench of reality. The Cloaca Maxima was essentially the ancient world's answer to a modern-day plumbing crisis, transforming putrid pools into flowing streams beneath the city. Constructing this engineering marvel required materials that were both strong and economical. Enter tufa stone, the Etruscans got a building material. This volcanic rock was abundant in central Italy, making it a budget-friendly option. Tufa is relatively easy to cut when freshly quarried, hardening over time as it dries and reacts with the air. This made it perfect for the Etruscans' needs, durable enough to withstand the test of time, yet affordable and locally sourced. It was like the Swiss Army knife of building materials, versatile, reliable, and always there when you needed it. The Etruscans didn't just stop at the Cloaca Maxima. They developed a whole network of drainage systems that kept their cities functioning smoothly. These systems were a testament to their advanced understanding of hydraulics and urban planning. By channeling rainwater and waste out of the city, the Etruscans not only improved urban health, but also laid the groundwork for future civilizations to build upon. The Romans, as we know, took these ideas and ran with them, but they'd be the first to admit, well, maybe the second, that they stood on the shoulders of Etruscan giants. Now, let's not romanticize the past too much. The Cloaca Maxima wasn't exactly a pristine stream. It was, after all, a sewer. But in a world where disease was rampant and the understanding of germs was as distant as the moon, having a functioning sewage system was akin to having a magic bullet for public health. The Etruscans might not have known about bacteria, but they certainly knew the benefits of keeping filth out of sight and out of smell. The economic considerations behind these engineering feats were as significant as the technical ones. Tufa was cheap, yes, but labor wasn't. Building these systems required a workforce skilled in quarrying, transporting, and assembling massive stone blocks. This wasn't a DIY weekend project. It was a massive public works undertaking that required coordination and resources. The investment paid off, though, as these infrastructures not only improved the quality of life, but also attracted trade and prosperity. A clean city is an attractive city, after all. In the grand tapestry of history, the Etruscans are often overshadowed by the Roman Empire's bright lights. Yet, their contributions to engineering and urban planning provided the essential groundwork for Rome's future. The Cloaca Maxima is just one example of how they managed to marry practicality with ambition, an approach that would resonate through the ages. While the Romans might have built an empire of marble and military might, the Etruscans laid a foundation of stone and sewage. And when it comes to the gritty realities of civilization, that foundation is worth its weight in gold. As we delve deeper into the world of Etruscan engineering, it's clear that their methods and materials were as much about economic savvy as they were about aesthetic prowess. The Etruscans had a knack for making the most of what they had, turning local resources into architectural wonders and practical solutions. This blend of practicality and beauty is a hallmark of their civilization, one that set the stage for the architectural feats of their Roman successors. Stay tuned, because there's plenty more to uncover about the Etruscans' engineering genius. From their intricate drainage systems to their mastery of materials like tufa, we're just scratching the surface of what made this civilization so ahead of its time. Who knew that plumbing and stone could tell such a captivating story? Now that we've marveled at the Etruscans' urban plumbing wizardry, let's take a stroll into their necropolises, where architecture and afterlife planning collided in the most fascinating ways. It turns out the Etruscans weren't just ahead of their time in urban planning. They were also pioneers of the ultimate real estate, the eternal kind. But don't think of these necropolises as mere cemeteries. Oh no, they were more like ancient gated communities for the dearly departed. The Banditaxia necropolis, for example, is essentially a sprawling city of the dead, complete with its own street grid and tombs that mimic the homes of the living. Located in Servadary, the Banditaxia necropolis covers over 400 hectares. Imagine the size of nearly 1,000 football fields, just to get a sense of scale. These Etruscan tombs weren't just places to rest in peace. They were designed to reflect the status and style of those interred within. This wasn't just about going quietly into the night. It was about making a statement from beyond the grave. The wealthier you were in life, the more elaborate your final digs. Some tombs even have multiple rooms and are decorated with vibrant frescoes, showcasing scenes from daily life, feasts, and mythology. It's like the Etruscans were throwing a perpetual party in the afterlife, and everyone was invited, except the living, of course. The architecture of these tombs is a testament to the Etruscans' engineering prowess. They utilized the corbel arch, a precursor to the true arch that the Romans would later perfect. The corbel arch is formed by overlapping stones until they meet at the top, creating a self-supporting structure. This technique allowed for larger and more stable tombs, a critical feature considering the weight of the earth above them. The Etruscans were essentially building underground bunkers long before it was cool, and while the Romans might get all the credit for their architectural innovations, it's clear they took a few notes from their Etruscan predecessors. But why put so much effort into these elaborate tombs? Was it all just about showing off? Partly, yes. In Etruscan society, the tomb was a way to flaunt one's wealth and social status, a final hurrah that said, "I mattered." But there was more to it than just vanity. These tombs also reflect the Etruscan belief in an afterlife where the dead lived on in a world mirroring the living one. This belief is evident in the tomb's layouts, which mimic Etruscan homes, complete with furniture and utensils, everything one might need in the great beyond. It was a mix of pragmatism and spirituality, a way to ensure that the afterlife was as comfortable and familiar as the world left behind. Now, let's debunk a myth or two. The romantic notion that the Etruscans were obsessed with death is a bit of a misrepresentation. Sure, their necropolises are impressive, but they reveal more about Etruscan life than they do about any morbid fascination with death. These cities of the dead were designed to celebrate life, with tombs adorned in festive murals and filled with artifacts that speak to the vibrancy of Etruscan culture. They were more about continuity than finality, a way to bridge the gap between worlds rather than a somber farewell. Economics, as always, played a role in these necropolises. Constructing such elaborate tombs was no small feat and required a significant investment. The materials alone, stone, clay, and pigments for decoration, weren't cheap. And let's not forget the artisans and laborers who carved and built these resting places. This was a full-scale industry, supported by the wealth of Etruscan society, which was, in turn, fueled by trade and agriculture. The Etruscans knew how to turn a profit in life and invested in death, ensuring their legacy endured long after their earthly departure. The necropolises also highlight the Etruscans' artistry, blending engineering with aesthetic finesse. The tombs are adorned with intricate carvings and paintings, showcasing not just technical skill, but also a keen eye for detail. These artistic touches weren't just for show. They were an integral part of the tomb's function, telling stories and providing comfort to the souls residing there. It's a fascinating blend of utility and beauty, a hallmark of Etruscan architecture that the Romans would later emulate on a grand scale. As we wander through the Banditaxia, it's clear that these cities of the dead offer a window into the living world of the Etruscans. They reveal a society that valued community, craftsmanship, and continuity, a place where the lines between life and afterlife were beautifully blurred. The necropolises are a testament to the Etruscans' ability to blend practicality with imagination, creating spaces that were as much about living as they were about dying. In this ongoing saga of Etruscan innovation, their necropolises stand as a reminder that even in death there is life. These tombs are not just static relics of the past, but vibrant echoes of a civilization that knew how to leave a lasting impression. As we dig deeper into the Etruscan world, it's clear that they were masters of more than just engineering. They were storytellers and visionaries, crafting a narrative that would endure long after their cities fell silent. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover about the Etruscans and their remarkable legacy. From their engineering genius to their cultural contributions, this journey through history is far from over. And remember, the next time you find yourself in awe of Roman architecture or city planning, give a nod to the Etruscans, the original architects of antiquity's unsung wonders. The Etruscans, those ancient masters of architecture, were more than just adept at crafting cities for the living and the dead. They also knew how to build a temple or two that could make even the guards nod in approval. But don't go picturing massive stone monoliths a la Greek Parthenon just yet. Etruscan temples were a different breed, a testament to resourcefulness and environment-driven creativity. When you think of grand temples, the mind often wanders to visions of marble and stone. However, the Etruscans, ever the pragmatists, opted for wood and mud brick as their primary materials. Why, you ask? Well, it wasn't just about style, darling. It was economics and climate talking. Stone was a luxury that was often as scarce as a Roman senator's sense of humility, whereas wood and mud brick were locally abundant and easier on the wallet. These materials were also more forgiving in the temperamental Italian climate, with its humid summers and wet winters. Their temples were typically built on a high podium, a feature that was less about reaching the heavens and more about protecting their sacred sites from floodwaters. The high podiums, often faced with stone, were a nod to practicality, ensuring that the temples stood the test of time, at least until the next big storm rolled through. And when it came to columns, the Etruscans were no slouches either. Their signature Tuscan column was a simplified, more elegant version of the Greek Doric column, made from wood, with a smooth shaft and a simple capital. It was architecture with a minimalist twist, long before minimalism was cool. But these temples were more than just architectural eye candy. They were the beating heart of Etruscan communities, serving as both religious sanctuaries and bustling community centers. A temple was where political alliances were forged, economic deals were brokered, and yes, the occasional sacrifice to the gods was made. In the Etruscan world, religion and politics were as intertwined as spaghetti and meatballs, and temples were the ultimate venues for both divine and civic affairs. They were the town halls of their day, minus the endless council meetings and obligatory PowerPoint presentations. Building these temples wasn't just about keeping the guards happy, though that was certainly a bonus. It was about showcasing a city's wealth and power. The more impressive the temple, the more clout the city had, both in the eyes of the guards and its neighbors. It was a bit like keeping up with the Joneses, but with more incense burning and fewer garden gnomes. The construction of a temple was a community affair, requiring resources and labor that underscored the sophisticated societal structures of the Etruscan cities. The temples weren't just built, they were invested in, both financially and socially. Speaking of investments, these temples were also political tools. Etruscan leaders often used them to legitimize their rule, invoking divine favor to bolster their authority. A ruler who could claim the support of the gods was a ruler worth following, or at least that was the idea. Temples were places where the divine and the political did a delicate dance, each step carefully choreographed to maintain societal balance. It was politics wrapped in piety, a fusion that kept the wheels of Etruscan society turning smoothly. Now, let's debunk a myth or two. It's tempting to think of these temples as solemn places of exclusive worship, closed off to the hoi polloi. In reality, they were more like ancient community centers. Sure, they had their sacred inner sanctums reserved for the priests and priestesses, but the outer areas were hubs of activity. Markets, festivals, and public gatherings were all part and parcel of temple life. So, while the divine rituals were happening inside, the real action was often outside, where deals were struck, gossip was exchanged, and life thrummed with the energy of commerce and community. And let's not leave out the economic context. Constructing a temple was a massive undertaking that required significant resources. The cost wasn't just in materials, but also in manpower. Skilled craftsmen, laborers, and artists all had a part to play, and their wages were a significant investment. But the return was a structure that not only served a religious function, but also solidified a city's status and attracted trade and prosperity. A city with a grand temple was a city with prestige, drawing traders and travelers like moths to a flame. In this whirlwind tour of Etruscan temples, it's clear that these structures were more than just places of worship. They were the embodiment of Etruscan ingenuity, blending practicality with spiritual purpose. They remind us that architecture is as much about the people who build it as it is about the gods it's meant to honor. The Etruscans, with their flair for innovation and community, left a legacy in stone, wood, and mud brick, a legacy that whispered through the corridors of history, reminding us of the rich tapestry of human endeavor. Of course, as we marvel at these ancient feats, it's easy to romanticize the past. But let's not forget that these temples, like all human creations, were products of their time. They tell stories of a civilization that understood the power of architecture to shape society, to influence politics, and to bridge the earthly with the divine. The temples were a testament to the Etruscans' ability to balance the practical with the spiritual, crafting spaces that were as much about community as they were about faith. So, As we continue to explore the fascinating world of the Etruscans, let's keep in mind that these ancient architects were not just building structures, but crafting a legacy that would resonate through the ages. Their temples stand as a reminder of a people who knew how to make the most of their resources, turning the mundane into the magnificent. And in doing so, they left a mark that would last long after their civilization faded into the annals of history. Stay tuned, because the story of the Etruscans is far from over, and there are still many more wonders to uncover. And speaking of ancient wonders that refuse to be forgotten, let's pivot back to the Etruscans and their indelible mark on the architectural world. The Etruscans, those trailblazing maestros of stone and structure, might not have gotten top billing in the history books, but they were the unsung heroes who laid down the architectural rulebook that the Romans would later plagiarize with gusto. The Romans might have had their Colosseum, but without the Etruscans' knack for engineering, those famous arches might have ended up looking more like tragic stone rainbows. First, let's hit the roads. The Etruscans were essentially the Google Maps of the ancient world, charting paths that would connect communities and facilitate trade. Their roads weren't just dirt tracks. They were carefully constructed with layers of stones and gravel, designed to withstand the wear and tear of chariots, as well as the occasional rainstorm. Road building in ancient Italy wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about stitching together the fabric of a civilization. These thoroughfares laid the groundwork, literally, for the Roman roads that would later span 400,000 kilometers, crisscrossing the empire like the world's first interstate highway system. Thanks, Etruscans, for setting the standard for Roman road rage. But let's not stop at roads. The Etruscans were also the original bridge builders, both literally and metaphorically. Their use of the arch in bridge construction was nothing short of revolutionary. These bridges, with their sturdy arches, could bear the weight of armies and wagons, making them essential for both commerce and conquest. This wasn't just about getting across a river. It was about ensuring that the wheels of trade and military might kept spinning. The Ponte Santa Trinita in Florence, a descendant of Etruscan engineering, stands as a testament to their innovative spirit, even if the original might have crumbled under the weight of history. Now, if you're wondering why the Etruscans aren't household names despite their monumental contributions, blame it on the Romans for stealing the show and the blueprints. The Romans did what they do best: conquer and improve. They took the Etruscan innovations in roads and bridges and scaled them up with the efficiency of a modern assembly line. Roman roads connected cities across Europe, and their bridges spanned rivers from the Tiber to the Thames. But beneath all that Roman grandeur was the unheralded genius of the Etruscans, whose innovations provided the foundations for Rome's imperial ambitions. Economically speaking, these infrastructural marvels were a game changer. Roads and bridges aren't just about physical connectivity, they're economic lifelines. The Etruscans understood that a well-paved road meant more than just smoother rides. It meant faster trade routes, a bustling economy, and the power to project influence far beyond their city walls. Every pebble laid and arch constructed was an investment in prosperity, ensuring that goods flowed as freely as gossip in the city squares. Now let's tackle the myth of the Etruscans being a lost civilization. Sure, they didn't leave behind libraries of scrolls or towering monuments for the ages, but to say they disappeared is like saying a whisper doesn't linger in the air. The Etruscans didn't vanish. They evolved, their culture absorbed into the Roman tapestry. Their language might be a linguistic puzzle, but their architectural and urban planning legacies are written in the stones of every Roman road and the arches of every aqueduct. They were the original urban planners. Their city grids are precursor to the order and efficiency that would define Roman cities, and by extension, modern urban centers. The Etruscans also left a cultural imprint that's trickier to quantify, but no less significant. Their religious practices, artistic styles, and even their penchant for augury seeped into Roman life. The Romans might have tweaked and polished these elements to fit their own grand narrative, but the Etruscan influence was as inescapable as the smell of freshly baked bread at a Roman banquet. The Etruscans showed the Romans how to blend practicality with panache, an enduring lesson in style and substance. In the grand narrative of history, the Etruscans might seem overshadowed, but their legacy is the kind that quietly endures, shaping the world in subtle but profound ways. Their roads and bridges were the veins and arteries of a civilization, their urban planning a blueprint for future cities. They didn't just build structures. They crafted a civilization that would continue to influence the world long after their own cities fell silent. As we wrap up our deep dive into the Etruscan world, let's tip our hats to these ancient architects of progress. They were the unsung maestros who laid the groundwork for the Roman Empire's architectural triumphs, proving that sometimes the greatest legacies are the ones that quietly support the foundations of history. So, next time you find yourself strolling down a cobblestone road or marveling at an ancient arch, spare a thought for the Etruscans, the original architects of antiquity's wonders, whose whispers still echo through time. In the land of dense jungles and relentless heat, the Maya were busy doing something that would make even the most seasoned architect do a double take. Around 1000 BC, these folks weren't just thinking about how to make a roof over their heads. They were obsessed with touching the sky, metaphorically speaking, of course. Enter the Maya pyramids, the Lego sets of the ancient world, only with a slight uptick in complexity and a lot more at stake. Let's start with the Pyramid of Kukulkan, shall we? This bad boy stands in Chichen Itza and looks like an overachiever at a pyramid convention. It's not just a pile of stones stacked like a giant's Jenga tower. No, it's a calendar, a clock, and a religious statement all rolled into one. The pyramid is designed with 365 steps, one for each day of the year, making it the ancient world's equivalent of a Fitbit, keeping track of time and perhaps a little exercise. But it wasn't all about practicality. The pyramid also served as a stage for a shadowy snake illusion during the equinoxes, when the setting sun creates a shadow that looks like a serpent slithering down the steps. It's like the ancient Maya were saying, "Hey, Stonehenge, hold my corn beer." Now, why were these pyramids such a big deal? Well, for starters, the Maya knew how to work a crowd. These structures were the centerpieces of their cities, serving religious, political, and social purposes. If Instagram had been around, you can bet their pyramid selfies would have broken the internet. They didn't just slap together rocks and call it a day. Each pyramid was a carefully crafted symbol of power and spirituality. They were the skyscrapers of their time, towering over the jungle canopy and offering a glimpse into a world where gods and humans coexisted in a complex dance of devotion and dominance. Let's take a moment to appreciate the brains behind these architectural masterpieces. The Maya weren't just throwing stones around willy-nilly. Their approach combined aesthetics with a keen understanding of engineering principles. Picture it, a civilization with no metal tools, no beasts of burden, and certainly no cranes. Yet they managed to construct these monumental structures that have stood the test of time, a feat that even some modern contractors might envy. The Maya used limestone for their buildings, which, fun fact, was locally sourced. Talk about eco-friendly before it was cool. When you compare this to what the Western world was doing at the time, it's like comparing a Ferrari to a horse-drawn cart. Around the same period, most of Europe was still figuring out how not to burn down their wooden houses, while the Maya were fine-tuning acoustics in their ball courts. It's a bit like the friend who shows up at your backyard barbecue with a gourmet dish while you're still struggling with the grill. Now, it wasn't all about the grandeur. These pyramids had practical functions too. They were the epicenters of Maya cities, serving as the backdrop for religious ceremonies, political gatherings, and community events. Imagine a TED talk, but with more feathers and less PowerPoint. Here, the rulers would ascend the steps, not just for the leg workout, but to demonstrate their divine right to rule. In a world where religion and politics were as intertwined as a pretzel, these structures were the ultimate power move. But let's not get too misty-eyed about the grandeur of these pyramids. Life in the Maya world wasn't all sun-drenched ceremonies and shadowy snake shows. The labor force behind these architectural wonders was likely less enthused about the whole affair. While we can't time travel to get a first-hand account, it's safe to assume that the construction process was grueling. Imagine hauling tons of limestone blocks without the aid of wheels or animals. It's enough to make even the most ardent gym rat break into a cold sweat. As for the mythical allure that surrounds these pyramids, it's easy to see why they capture the imagination. The idea of a lost civilization with mystical powers is much more appealing than the reality of a society grappling with political strife, environmental challenges, and societal pressures. Yet, it's crucial to peel back the layers of myth and appreciate the true ingenuity and complexity of the Maya civilization. They were real people, with real challenges, who managed to leave an indelible mark on history through their architectural prowess. In essence, the Maya pyramids weren't just structures. They were dynamic symbols of a civilization at its peak. They demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of the world, blending religious beliefs with scientific observations, and leaving a legacy that continues to intrigue and inspire. As we continue to dig deeper into the past, both literally and figuratively, these ancient structures remind us that human ingenuity has always had the power to reach for the heavens, even when our feet are firmly planted on the ground. While the Maya pyramids were indeed marvels of ambition and artistry, they didn't just pop up overnight like mushrooms after a rainstorm. No, they were the result of a potent cocktail of economic strategy and political muscle. Think of them as the ultimate ancient flex. The Maya rulers were like the original real estate moguls, except their properties came with a side of celestial alignment and religious significance. First, let's talk economics. The Maya weren't constructing these architectural wonders just for the Instagram likes, if those had existed, that is. These pyramids were costly endeavors, both in terms of resources and manpower. Labor, you see, was the currency of the realm. The workforce was largely composed of peasants who were volunteered for these projects. They were essentially paying their taxes in sweat and stone, which feels like a raw deal until you consider the absence of tax forms and audits. Plus, with no metal tools or wheels, this was the ultimate cross-fit challenge. Forget lifting weights. Try hauling limestone blocks, each weighing several tons, over miles of jungle terrain. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like a logistical nightmare, you're not wrong. But here's where the Maya showed their true genius. They organized these massive labor efforts with military precision. It's estimated that a single pyramid could require thousands of workers laboring over several years. Imagine the project management skills needed to coordinate that. Forget your office's Slack channel. This was a monumental feat of human organization, and all without a single spreadsheet in sight. On the political front, these structures were as much about power as they were about piety. The Maya elite were nothing if not savvy in the art of ancient public relations. These grand edifices weren't just about touching the sky, they were about keeping the people in line. Pyramids were the physical manifestation of a ruler's divine right and authority. They were the billboards of the ancient world, except instead of advertising fast food, they were proclaiming, "I am your king, and yes, the gods are on my side." The rulers' political campaigns were literally set in stone. Each block laid was a testament to their power and influence. These buildings served as the backdrop for elaborate ceremonies that reinforced the social order. Picture it, a ruler adorned in all their feathered finery, standing atop a pyramid, delivering a rousing speech, or maybe just a solemn proclamation that echoed down to the masses below. It was the ultimate power move, a reminder of who held the reins in this cosmic rodeo. To maintain this aura of divine authority, the Maya rulers were adept at mixing religion with politics. The pyramids weren't just stone behemoths, they were celestial calendars and sacred temples. By aligning their constructions with astronomical events, the Maya were able to claim a direct connection with the cosmos. This wasn't just architecture, it was cosmic choreography, and it worked like a charm. The people were awed, the rulers were revered, and the social order was maintained. But let's not put on rose-colored glasses and pretend it was all celestial harmony and starry-eyed devotion. In reality, the laborers who built these pyramids likely had a different perspective. While the rulers were basking in the glory of their celestial architecture, the workforce was grappling with the back-breaking reality of construction. It's one thing to admire the engineering prowess of these structures. It's another to be the one dragging stones through the sweltering heat. Despite the harsh realities, the allure of these structures is undeniable. They symbolize a civilization that managed to rise above its challenges, both literally and metaphorically. They represent the pinnacle of Maya ingenuity and ambition, but they also remind us that history is written by the victors, or in this case, the builders. The Maya pyramids stand as a testament not just to a civilization's architectural achievements, but also to its social and political complexities. In essence, these grand structures were the stage upon which the Maya rulers performed their divine right to rule. They were symbols of power, instruments of social cohesion, and marvels of engineering all rolled into one. As we dig deeper into the layers of history, we uncover not just the stones and mortar, but the stories of the people who built them and the rulers who commanded them. The Maya pyramids are more than just ancient relics. They are windows into a world where power was measured in stone and sky. And so, the story of the Maya pyramids continues, their stones whispering tales of ambition, power, and the eternal human quest to leave a mark on the world. As we peel back the layers of myth and reality, we find a civilization that was not just reaching for the heavens, but also deeply rooted in the earth. A civilization that, despite the odds, managed to construct monuments that continue to captivate our imagination and spark our curiosity. Yet, as we shift our gaze from the towering pyramids to the palatial residences of the Maya elite, we're stepping from public grandeur into the intimate quarters of power. Think of these palaces not as mere homes, but as dynamic hubs where politics, economics, and social hierarchies intertwined like an ancient game of chess. These weren't just houses. Oh no, they were the command centers from which rulers orchestrated the daily rhythm of their city-states. Take the famed palace of the governor in Uxmal, for instance. Built around the turn of the 10th century AD, this architectural masterpiece sprawls over an impressive 200 square meters. That's about the size of 3 basketball courts, or, for the historically inclined, larger than most European castles of the same era. This was a place where the Maya elite didn't just live. They strategized, entertained, and judged. The palace was essentially the ancient equivalent of a modern-day corporate headquarters, if corporate HQs came with a side of jaguar motifs and celestial symbolism. Now, let's talk about design. Maya palaces were typically elongated structures with multiple rooms, often built atop raised platforms. These platforms weren't just for show. They served as a defense mechanism against the tropical downpours that could turn the ground into a mud bath faster than you can say El Niño. The Maya were masters of managing their environment, and their architecture reflects a deep understanding of the land they inhabited. Inside these palatial walls, life was a mix of luxury and bureaucracy. The Maya elite were all about keeping up appearances. The palaces were adorned with stucco decorations and elaborate carvings. Imagine living in a place where your home is not just a roof over your head, but a canvas for artisans to display their skills. These buildings were the Instagram feeds of their day, showcasing wealth, power, and an appreciation for artistic flair. As for the day-to-day life, let's be real, it was a tale of 2 cities. For the ruling class, life was a continuous cycle of feasting, trading, and managing affairs of state. The rulers would entertain foreign dignitaries and local leaders alike, forging alliances and strengthening their influence like a pre-Columbian version of Game of Thrones, sans dragons, but with plenty of drama. Meanwhile, the laborers and artisans who supported this lifestyle lived in more humble abodes, often clustered around these palatial centers. It was social stratification at its finest, an architectural embodiment of the class divide. And here's where the economic context weaves into the architectural fabric. The palaces were not just seats of power, they were centers of economic activity. The Maya traded in everything from cacao, the currency of choice for those with a sweet tooth, to jade and obsidian. These palatial complexes were the beating hearts of the Maya economy, where goods were exchanged and alliances were brokered over the clink of ceremonial beverages. But the Maya weren't just savvy traders and political powerhouses. They were also environmental innovators. Anyone who's experienced the Yucatan Peninsula's dry season knows that water management isn't just a good idea, it's a necessity. The Maya developed sophisticated systems to collect and store rainwater, such as chultuns, underground reservoirs that were architectural marvels in their own right. The ability to manage water resources effectively was a crucial factor in sustaining large urban populations and ensuring the survival of their cities. It's like they were saying, we're here to stay, and we're bringing our own water supply. Of course, no discussion about the Maya would be complete without addressing the elephant in the room, or rather, the jungle, their so-called mysterious disappearance. Cue the eerie music and conspiracy theories about alien abductions. But let's pump the brakes on the supernatural train for a second. The truth is much more grounded, albeit less sensational. By the 9th century AD, Many of the great Maya cities in the southern lowlands were abandoned, but this wasn't some overnight vanishing act. It was a gradual decline, influenced by a cocktail of factors including prolonged drought, overpopulation, resource depletion, and internal strife. Archaeological evidence paints a picture of a society straining under its own weight. Deforestation and soil exhaustion made agriculture increasingly difficult, while the ever-growing demands of the elite put an unsustainable burden on the lower classes. It's a classic tale of ecological balance gone awry, with a dash of political turmoil for good measure. The Maya didn't vanish, they adapted. Many moved northward to regions like the Yucatan Peninsula, where cities like Chichen Itza continued to thrive. So, let's debunk the myth. The Maya civilization didn't disappear, they evolved. Their culture, language, and descendants persist to this day, like a river that changes course but never stops flowing. The romantic notion of a lost civilization is tempting, but it's crucial to recognize the resilience and adaptability of the Maya people. They were architects of their own destiny, navigating the complexities of their world with the same ingenuity that built their pyramids and palaces. As we delve deeper into the layers of Maya history, we uncover not just the structures they left behind, but the stories of innovation, survival, and adaptation that continue to resonate. Their legacy is a testament to the enduring spirit of a civilization that, despite the odds, left an indelible mark on history. The Maya palaces and their ingenious solutions to environmental challenges remind us that history is not just a series of events, but a tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of ambition, creativity, and resilience. And so, the tale of the Maya continues, with their palaces whispering stories of power, ingenuity, and the ever-present struggle to balance the demands of society with the limits of the natural world. As we explore further, we'll uncover more about their remarkable achievements and the lessons they offer to a modern world facing its own set of challenges. The journey through the ruins of the Maya civilization is far from over. It's a path that leads us to new understandings and deeper connections with the past. The allure of the Maya civilization isn't just in its grand structures or even its intricate calendar, but in the way it interwove mythology with stone and starry skies. The Maya didn't just build with a sense of purpose, they built with the cosmos in mind. Their architecture was a cosmic canvas, where each stone whispered tales of gods, legends, and celestial events. Now, let's dive into the mythological significance and astronomical alignments that were literally set in stone. Because if you're going to build a civilization, why not align it with the stars, right? First, let's talk symbolism. The Maya were masters of making architecture a three-dimensional storybook. Take El Castillo, also known as the Temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza. It's like a cosmic Swiss Army knife, functioning as a calendar, a clock, and a giant sundial. Its four sides, each with 91 steps, plus the top platform, add up to 365, mirroring the solar year. This wasn't coincidence. It was cosmology with a splash of math. The Maya were saying, "We see you, son, and yes, we've got your number." But it wasn't just about keeping track of time. It was about projecting divine order onto the earthly plane. The descent of the feathered serpent god, Kukulkan, during the equinoxes was a theatrical performance of light and shadow. As the sun hit the pyramid just right, a shadow slithered down the steps, forming the body of a snake. It was part spiritual spectacle, part ancient special effects show, a reminder of the divine dance between the heavens and the earth. Beyond the pyramids, the Maya incorporated astronomy into their everyday lives. Their cities were meticulously aligned with celestial events. Observatories like the Caracal at Chichen Itza were the ancient world's version of a planetary app. These structures weren't just about stargazing. They were about syncing the human experience with the rhythm of the universe. The Maya tracked the movements of Venus and other celestial bodies with the precision of a Swiss watchmaker. Venus, for example, was often associated with warfare and was used to time battles. Picture ancient generals consulting the stars like a cosmic GPS before marching off to battle. Now, let's tackle the romanticized views of the mystical Maya. Modern culture tends to paint them as a civilization shrouded in mystery and magic, thanks in part to pop culture's love affair with the exotic and enigmatic. But the reality is far more grounded. The Maya were not mystical magicians. They were mathematicians, astronomers, and engineers deeply in tune with their environment and the cosmos. This doesn't make them any less fascinating. On the contrary, it highlights their ingenuity and resourcefulness. They didn't have crystal balls. They had keen observations and a profound understanding of celestial cycles. The romantic notion of a lost civilization with otherworldly knowledge is tempting, but it overlooks the harsh realities and practical challenges the Maya faced. Their achievements were not the result of supernatural intervention, but of hard work, resilience, and a sophisticated grasp of astronomy and mathematics. Let's face it, the idea of mystical Maya priests chanting incantations under a full moon sounds cool, but the truth is even cooler. They were data-driven decision-makers of their time. Moreover, the Maya weren't just stargazers, they were timekeepers. Their long count calendar is a testament to their obsession with time and cycles. It's a complex system that tracks not just years or centuries, but entire epochs. When the calendar famously ended in 2012, it sparked a frenzy of doomsday predictions that missed the mark entirely. The Maya weren't predicting the end of the world. They were marking the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. It was a cosmic reset button, not a cosmic catastrophe. In essence, the Maya's architectural and astronomical achievements were about more than just bricks and stars. They were about creating order in a chaotic universe. They saw their world as an extension of the cosmos, a place where human actions could influence celestial events and vice versa. Their buildings were not just shelters or temples. They were stages for the cosmic drama, where the earthly and the divine met in a harmonious dance. So, as we look back at these incredible structures and the myths that surround them, let's give credit where credit is due. The Maya weren't mystical seers of the jungle. They were pragmatic architects of their destiny, using the stars as their guide and limestone as their canvas. Their legacy is not just one of grandeur and mystery, but of a deep connection to the universe and an enduring testament to human ingenuity. As we ponder the Maya's cosmic choreography, it's clear that their story is far from over. There's still much to uncover about how they lived, loved, and looked to the stars for answers. So, let's keep our eyes on the heavens and our feet on the ground as we continue this journey through the remarkable world of the Maya. Stay tuned for the next chapter of this ancient saga, where we'll delve even deeper into their enigmatic history and uncover more about their unparalleled legacy. As we ponder the Maya's cosmic choreography, it's clear that their story is far from over. There's still much to uncover about how they lived, loved, and looked to the stars for answers. So, let's keep our eyes on the heavens and our feet on the ground as we continue this journey through the remarkable world of the Maya, now shifting our gaze from the grandeur of the past to the echoes that resonate in the present. Let's kick things off by considering how the Maya's architectural legacy continues to impact modern building techniques. You might think that a civilization that peaked over 1,000 years ago has little to teach today's tech-savvy architects, but you'd be wrong. The Maya were sustainability trailblazers long before it became a buzzword. Their cities were marvels of environmental integration, designed to complement rather than conquer nature. Take their water management systems, for example. Those chultuns, underground water reservoirs, are the ancient equivalent of modern-day rainwater harvesting systems. They captured and stored precious rainwater, ensuring a steady supply even during dry spells. In an era where water scarcity is a growing concern, the Maya's resourcefulness offers a blueprint for resilient urban planning. Modern architects are also taking notes from the Maya playbook when it comes to materials. The Maya's use of locally sourced limestone was not just a practical choice, but an early exercise in reducing carbon footprints. Today, there's a growing movement towards using local materials to minimize environmental impact, a trend the Maya were practicing with stone-cold efficiency centuries ago. It's as if the Maya were saying, forget importing flashy materials, build with what the land provides. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the allure of Maya architecture in pop culture and beyond. Modern fascination with these structures is akin to a never-ending archaeological soap opera, with each discovery adding a new layer of intrigue. The ruins at Tikal, Palenque, and Kapan continue to draw millions of visitors each year, each hoping to catch a glimpse of ancient ingenuity. It's like the architectural equivalent of binge-watching a historical drama, with the added bonus of actual ruins to explore. But let's not get too swept away by the romance here. The reality is that these structures were the result of rigorous planning, back-breaking labor, and a keen understanding of both the cosmos and the limestone beneath their feet. The Mayas' architectural achievements also serve as cautionary tales about the limits of human ambition. Their decline wasn't due to some mysterious cosmic shift, but rather a sobering reminder of what happens when societies push their environments to the brink. Overpopulation, deforestation, and resource depletion were factors that contributed to the collapse of many Maya city-states. These are lessons that echo ominously in today's world, where climate change and environmental degradation are pressing concerns. The Maya story is a stark reminder that even the most advanced civilizations can falter without sustainable practices. Yet, despite their decline, the Mayas' cultural and architectural legacy has proven resilient beyond measure. Today, the descendants of the Maya continue to inhabit the regions their ancestors once ruled, preserving traditions and languages that have endured millennia. Their continued presence is a testament to the adaptability and endurance of Maya culture, a reminder that while stones may crumble, the spirit of a people can endure. It's the ultimate clapback against the idea of a lost civilization. And let's not forget the sheer innovation the Maya brought to the table. Their pyramids and palaces were not just about grandeur. They were expressions of a culture that valued precision, harmony, and an intimate connection with the stars. The Mayas' ability to blend function with cosmic symbolism is a testament to their unique worldview, one where every stone was placed with purpose, and every shadow cast was a reflection of the divine order. In an age where buildings often prioritize aesthetics over substance, the Maya remind us that true architectural greatness lies in the balance of form, function, and meaning. As we wrap up this journey through Maya architecture, let's take a moment to appreciate the wit and wisdom of their legacy. The Maya weren't just builders of stone. They were architects of ideas, crafting a civilization that reached for the stars, even as it remained firmly rooted in the earth. Their story is one of triumph and adversity, of innovation and adaptation, and it serves as both an inspiration and a warning to us today. So next time you marvel at a skyscraper or ponder the latest eco-friendly building trend, tip your hat to the Maya. After all, they were crafting sustainable cities and aligning their structures with the cosmos long before it was trendy. In the end, the tale of the Maya is not just one of ancient ruins and cosmic alignments, but of a civilization that dared to dream big and build even bigger. Their legacy is a testament to the enduring human spirit, a reminder that our greatest achievements are born from the heart as much as the mind. So, here's to the Maya, the original architects of awe, the ancient innovators of sustainability, and the timeless teachers of resilience. As we look to the future, may we carry forward the lessons of the past, balancing our ambitions with the wisdom of those who came before us.